Yep. Oh, sorry. Yep, and this one right here. And Teams. There you go.
Prior to us coming to order, I'd like to refer anybody who needs translator services to Miss Gladys Duarte in the back.
President West. Buenas tardes. Hola, habla Gladys Duarte. Si necesita servicios de interpretación al español, por favor de llamar al 1-805-324-7680 e ingrese el código de acceso 563 590-525, más el teclado numeral. Este es el número totalmente gratuito. Nuevamente, el número de llamar de teléfono es el 1-805-324-7680 e ingresa el código de acceso 563-590-525 más el teclado numeral. También puede accesar estas instrucciones en nuestro sitio web en mcsforkids.com dirigiéndose a la parte inferior de la página Quick Links y haciendo clic en Board Agendas para la agenda de esta noche. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Duarte. Welcome to the Modesto City Schools special board meeting of February 22nd, 2021. The meeting is now called to order. We have two board members. Trustee Maestas will be via Teams tonight, and Trustee Lopez is via Teams while en route to the meeting. So I will be calling roll call. Student Representative Carranza? Thank you. Trustee Brown? Thank you. Trustee Irvin? Okay. Trustee Maestas? Have you checked in yet? No? Trustee Marks?
Yes, present.
Thank you. Trustee Mejia? Thank you. Vice President Lopez? I believe we have you via phone. Okay, got it. Thank you. And President West. Good evening, everyone. This open session meeting of the Board of Trustees is being live streamed at the direction of the board. The live stream is available on the district website, and the recordings will be available for viewing the day after the board meeting. Modesto City School Board meetings have been adjusted for the public to follow state guidelines on social distancing until further notice. This action was taken in response to the Governor's Executive Order N2520 and Resolution 1920-17, delegating authority to take necessary action to protect students and staff from the spread of coronavirus, also known as COVID-19, adopted by the Modesto City Schools on March 18, 2020. Regarding public comment, Modesto City Schools has provided an opportunity for the public to provide comment. It is outlined on the agenda. The public has been given an opportunity to call in and leave a voicemail, send us a comment via an email address, or appear in person before the board. This practice will continue until further notice. For members of the public that are interested in commenting in the future, we welcome your comments. We'll be moving on to A2, which is the period for public presentation. Ms. Chambers, are there any members of the public here who wish to speak? None, thank you. No speakers. Ms. Noonan, were there any comments from the public via email or voicemail for public presentation?
Yes, we have several comments, and I believe, is this the correct time? Or okay, perfect. I just wanted to verify. So you're going to be listening to me for a little while, and hopefully you can hear me okay? Thumbs up? Everybody's good?
I can hear you
okay,
fine.
Great.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get started. So our first comment is from Doug Burton, the president of the Modesto Teachers Association. The comment is as follows. Good afternoon, President West, trustees, Superintendent Noguchi, and cabinet. Since the very beginning of this pandemic, MTA has been a willing and cooperative partner in dealing with the unprecedented challenges facing education in these difficult times. In August, we began the school year in a completely distance learning model due to the widespread infection rates of COVID-19 in our community. As rates dropped, we collaboratively created a hybrid learning model to safely reopen TK through 6 schools. The model of instruction adopted in MCS is a concurrent teaching model where teachers instruct the students who are live while simultaneously teaching those at home digitally. This seemed reasonable at the time as it created the least disruption to students and provided the greatest flexibility and choice for families. No other district in Stanislaus County that I am aware of has offered or is offering this model to their families. The concurrent teaching model has proved to be a difficult, physically and mentally draining model, but has been reasonable as the cohorts have kept in-person class sizes small enough to manage while simultaneously teaching those online. The Wednesday with everyone receiving instruction via distance learning has proved invaluable for providing small group and one-on-one instruction. It is not reasonable for the district to combine cohorts, increasing the number of in-person students, and ask them to do this 5 days a week. It is also not reasonable for you to expect me to explain all the reasons why in 250 words or less. Modesto teachers are willing and wanting to safely instruct students in person. They just want a reasonable model that provides a reasonable work environment. Thank you. All right, the next comment comes from Lisa Schrock and Cody Alkery. I think I said that name correctly. During the last few months, it is our observation that the implementation of the hybrid learning model has only marginally improved academics over the full distance learning model. Rarely does the hybrid coursework fill an entire day. To adequately challenge our children, we have asked for additional assignments from instructors, created home assignments, purchased books, etc. A parent attempting this is not reasonable or appropriate, nor is it effective learning for our children. Health viewpoints pertaining to school closures/reopenings and children have evolved. The CDC last week published studies on how children can safely return to in-person instruction. They followed with a statement that teachers need not be vaccinated to return to an in-person model. The negative consequences of digital learning environment are now well known. Schools in our community have already nimbly adapted to COVID-19 with risk mitigation strategies in place that have allowed for full in-person instruction. The physical attendance for many classes is often half of the allowed maximum. It appears that even combining cohorts could result in a return to full in-person instruction 5 days a week in compliance with the Safe Schools opening plan. We recognize this would eliminate the daily choice for students to non-committally float in and out of attendance, but we believe that that would be a choice to which parents would commit and support. Return our children to full in-person instruction. It can be done safely. We are asking you to be leaders. Thank you, Lisa Schrock. The next comment is from, Shelley and Charles Brooks, their parents. Good afternoon. I appreciate you taking comments, and I hope that they will be heavily weighed when making the decisions whether to remain in distance learning or opening up our junior high and high schools. I have a junior high and high school student that I have watched become very apathetic about school. This is a far cry for both of them as they are starting new schools last year. As I listen, as I listen to their lectures, I am able to totally understand their discouragement. To no fault of the instructors, I am hearing hours of time that has nothing to do with the subject. Going through absences and grades in grade books for every student in the class, discussing why our county is still in a certain tier, just filling up space. The kids are supposed to sit and listen to that for an hour and a half a period. Please consider the thousands of kids sitting alone in their rooms on a daily basis. Even as I work from home and am checking on them regularly, I see the discouragement and frustration that this is causing. Again, thank you for hearing the parents and our concerns as we are on the front line seeing how our kids are responding. Next comment is from, Heather Phillips, a first grade teacher and parent. Board members and members of our community, I am a first grade teacher in MCS and a parent of 2 elementary age children. I agree we need to put students first and get them into classrooms. I'm writing today to give you perspective of what is happening in my classroom and why we need more support as we bring more students on campus. I have 2 recommendations. First, we need aides in our classroom to support the enormous academic and behavioral deficits we are seeing. Second, please require parents who want to remain online only to sign up for Modesto Virtual Academy. The students on campus are losing precious instructional time when I have to take attendance, change meeting settings, reshare dropped screens, and change plans by the minute due to unreliable technology. If you do not follow these recommendations, we risk sending the message that our current model is the best experience we can provide them. That is simply not true. The mental health of our students and staff in MCS is suffering. Some of my students are witnessing drug abuse, violence, and murder in our neighborhood. Some are experiencing neglect, poverty, homelessness, hunger, divorce, unstable medical conditions, and more. They need love, consistency, and attention. When teachers are required to teach, tethered to the weak internet connection at our site, I cannot provide them the love, consistency, and attention they desperately need. Please listen when I say that we are already hanging on by a thread. Respectfully, a first grade teacher. Excuse me, I'm sorry. The next comment comes from Elizabeth Guptill, a second grade teacher at Muir Elementary. To Dr. Noguchi, cabinet members, and the MCS Board of Education, it is with great dismay and disappointment that I send this. TK through 6 principals were directed to alert their staff that elementary sites are preparing to reopen by mid-March. Some principals were reluctant to send these emails, knowing that teachers had not had any communication from MTA, otherwise Modesto Teachers Association, regarding this change. Some schools even started sending phone dialer message before our district administration had negotiated with its labor partners. I can appreciate that it is difficult to obtain and manage the logistics of vaccinating MCS staff. I understand that working with the county means supplies and information change frequently. However, since March 2020, the district administration has emphasized how important the safety of students, families, and staff are to them. Clearly, this is no longer the case. If staff and student safety were of the utmost concern, we would wait until staff has been vaccinated to expand in-person instruction. I am, of course, worried about learning loss. Have you considered how much instruction is disrupted every time you change the teaching model? I have worked relentlessly to be flexible, pivot, and embrace every new type of curriculum delivery I can master, but this is too much. I am crushed and feel deceived that decisions are being made while keeping major stakeholders in the dark. I urge you to reconsider creating a plan without first consulting with the MTA leadership. Thank you. The next comment comes from Rod Zwallen, a parent. Dear board members, thank you for your continued efforts to return our students to full-time in-person instruction as quickly as possible. I know there are many factors to consider in your decision-making, not the least of which is the health and safety of our teachers and other school employees, which I would never want to compromise. As a parent of 2 elementary school children in MCS, I want to add my voice to the chorus of voices of parents whose children have suffered tremendously during the pandemic. The toll on my children emotionally, physically, and mentally has been tremendous. Now that we have a better understanding of the virus and have seen thousands of schools across the country open safely with positive outcomes, it's time to do the same here. It's time to get back to providing our children with the excellent public education that MCS has provided for so many years. Thank you for your time. The next comment is from an elementary school teacher. There's no name here. Good evening, board members. I am an elementary school teacher in the district, writing to express my opinion on the expansion of in-person days currently being considered by the board. I know this is a difficult decision as you balance the risks to education with the risk to the health and safety of your students, teachers, and staff. You are well aware of our current instructional model and the stresses it places on effective COVID mitigation. The more children in a classroom, the higher likelihood of contagion. We are in the 11th hour of the pandemic, and vaccinations are in sight. We have collectively made tremendous sacrifices to reach this point, and I would strenuously argue for maintaining our current posture while we cross the finish line to mass vaccinations and are able to return to in-person learning. Thank you for your consideration. The next comment also comes from an anonymous teacher at Modesto City Schools. The learning models teachers have experienced this year have been very difficult to work through, and many of us are at the breaking point. I have watched teachers in tears, or nearly in tears, on a daily basis. The amount of stress is overwhelming. Many teachers have threatened to quit their jobs and apply in other districts who are caring better for their teachers. Others are left wondering what other field of work they could go into because our concerns and needs are not being heard by the district, not in the slightest. The amount of pressure to perform and the amount of stress placed on teachers has never been higher. Enough is not being done to support teachers' physical and mental health through this very difficult time. I cannot speak for all district teachers or all K through 6 teachers, but I can speak as to the experiences of the teachers at our school site. The current model is not sustainable, and increasing the number of students in person while simultaneously trying to teach students at home is a continued recipe for disaster. We are constantly juggling throughout the day. Students who are struggling are having an increased difficulty in being successful because they do not have equal access at home, whereas in the classroom, they'd receive better support if teachers could be truly present with just one group of students and not 2 separate groups. Destination districts are districts who are not only thinking about what is best for the students, but also what is best for staff. Destination districts care about and make plans for the mental health of their staff members. They make it a focus, not an afterthought. The current model and the current proposed model are not what's best for kids. It isn't best for teachers either. The next comment comes from Mike Nicholas, who is a parent. Hello, our family is very excited with your plans to reopen schools full-time. Please follow through with this plan so students can get back to some normalcy. Our children need to return to in-person learning with their teachers and friends, and we support your efforts. The next comment is from Angela Long, a 3rd grade teacher at Muir Elementary. Board members, I am a 3rd grade teacher at John Muir School and have been successfully implementing hybrid instruction since November 30th. I am not against discussing bringing more students into my classroom. What I am against is the planning team that developed our current plan for merging the A and B cohorts failed to have one current TK through 6 teacher on it. I have respect for our CIPD department and other district leaders. However, no one can know what teaching and assessing in our current environment is like unless you are doing it day in and day out. I am always reminded of this when I take professional development courses, especially during the summer. Once I implement my new learning, I always find myself saying, oh, this doesn't work because of X, or I need to tweak Y. This is why it is crucial to have current TK through 6 teachers on the planning committee. For example, where did the start date of mid-March come from? Spring break is the week of March 22nd. Why not teach our hearts out in a manner that we are finally used to and students are accustomed to learning to ensure students increase their academic achievement? Learning will be lost during this transition as new routines and expectations will have to be taught and practiced, and then the week of spring break. This is just one example of being disappointed with learning about the plan the same day as parents. The parents were given a start date, not a possible start date of mid-March. Excuse me. In closing, please have current TK through 6 teachers on the expanding committee, or at least consult with them during the planning process. Thank you for listening. Excuse me. The next comment is from Jennifer McGrath-Aller, a teacher. I would like to explain why bringing back TK through 6 students 4 days instead of 5 is the better option. 4 days of in-person allows more time for small groups, assessment, and one-to-one support on the established Wednesday schedule. These activities are successful on Wednesdays as teachers don't have to manage concurrent instruction. A 4-day in-person schedule allows for the social emotional support for students while addressing the district's own concern for teacher wellness. 4 days allows teachers, parents, and students to not have to adopt another schedule. The entire schedule remains unchanged with the exception of students being in person for 4 days instead of 2. A hub model can easily be placed at sites on Wednesdays to accommodate a small number of parents that may require a 5th day due to their work situation. Do parents want their children back? Yes. Do teachers want their students back? Yes. We can appreciate the immense pressure the district is under to return students to in-person learning, but that decision needs to include what is best for all stakeholders. I keep hearing that other districts are opening 5 days, but it's important to note that they aren't providing concurrent instruction. Our plan is unique because it gave parents the choice of hybrid or distance learning without having to switch teachers. If we are going to continue to provide concurrent instruction, then we must pursue the 4 days of in-person with 1 day of distance learning option to ensure its success. Thank you. All right, next comment is from Michael and Amy Leach, their parents. They stated their names. We are parents of a 5th grader at Rose Avenue. We have decided to keep our daughter at home during this time, and she has done well with distance learning. Last Friday afternoon, we received a call from the Rose Avenue principal telling us that we had to make a decision by next week if we were planning on sending our daughter back for 4, possibly 5 days a week of in-person instruction. We were surprised by the sudden change and the urgency of the decision we had to make. We are frustrated that we must decide now based on a future that is still uncertain. As we have all learned during this time, nothing has been predictable. We are asked to decide now when we really have no idea what the COVID numbers and tiers will look like during the time our daughter would be in the classroom. This is a scary and unfair decision for parents to make. Another concern we have is with class size. We know that there are different numbers of how many students are allowed in the classroom based on the sizes of the classroom. What happens if more students show up than are allowed in the classroom? What happens if the number of students exceeds the number allowed? How do you choose which students will stay at school and which students will leave? Will some students be made to go home? Will students be placed with other teachers who maybe don't have as many kids to make up the numbers? Will the numbers allowed be honored, or will classrooms be packed beyond the numbers because there is no other place to put the kids? We are just wondering what to expect if we decide to let our daughter go back and then there is no room for her. These questions about class sizes should have a clear answer and shared with everyone, parents and teachers, before this difficult decision must be made. The next comment is very brief. It's I don't know how to put it, Jamie, I think, DL. And it just says, just inquiring about reopening schools and how important it is for the kids. Thank you. The next comment is from Brenna McNamara, a parent. The majority of our country has had high school students return to in-person learning. Some have done it very safely and successfully. MCS needs to do the same. Once the teachers have been vaccinated, there is no excuse to keep the students from returning if that is their parents' wish. Students who want to remain virtual should be instructed by teachers who want to remain virtual. I have firsthand seen teens becoming despondent, isolated, and hopeless. I have heard about the high fail rate. Kids who were happy and on track now are lost. I think the sacrifice we are asking the kids to make is much too high. MCS has some amazing teachers, and we would be sad to transfer to a private school if we felt that in-person school was not going to resume. COVID will not be cured. I hear people say the phrase after COVID. There is not an after. It's time to get kids back to friends, hands-on learning, sports, the arts, the mentorship of the teacher-student relationship. It's time that they feel hope again. Please. Sincerely, Brenna McNamara. The next comment comes from Mary Moroto, a second grade teacher at Christian Elementary. MCS Board and Dr. Noguchi, you have a moral obligation to provide a safe learning environment for the students and staff of Modesto City Schools. We have done well in our elementary schools, requiring masks, upgrading facilities, and maintaining CDC optimal 6 feet physical distance. You must not become complacent and pandemic fatigued, putting our collective health at risk. Older staff does not yet have access to vaccines, and there is no timeline for staff under 50 or students. Nationally, almost 500,000 folks have died, or the near equivalent of the entire population of Stanislaus County. Changing parameters of what constitutes a purple, red, or orange tier, or minimum/optimal physical distancing, does not affect the infectiousness of this virus. Do not needlessly compromise our safety protocols. COVID-19 is a serious public health threat and must be treated as such. Dead students and staff can't learn nor instruct. Thank you, Mary Moroto, second grade Christian Elementary. Next, we have Amy Irwin, a third grade teacher. Dear board members, the phrase, "we are all in this together," does not seem to aptly apply to the board or the administration who decided, without any input from the teachers, to inform the staff, as well as the parents, of plans to allow all students to come back to class full-time by mid-March. Had the district had the foresights to consult the teachers, who have yet to be vaccinated, this letter may not need to be read. Promising that students could still retain the same teacher and continue distance learning without asking for input from the certificated staff is in fact insulting. Do the board members have any idea how difficult it is to retain the attention of the students in class as well as at home? Have any of you spent any time in a classroom during distance learning? This decision smacks of the autocratic policies of the former president, which we have had to deal with for the past 4 years. With 500,000 dead due to COVID, so you really want this blood on your hands because you sent students back prior to vaccinating teachers? If this is to be the destination district you profess you want it to be, then perhaps you should consider polling the teachers on some of the best practices for these uncertain times, and then truly prove that we are all in this together. Next comment is from Ross Thomas, business owner. Dear MCS Board of Education, we love our children. We know that good teachers do as well. It is time to reopen our schools full-time 5 days per week. Most parents wanted to do what's needed to be done for our community, but after a year of failed policy and hurting children, the time has come to put aside your fear-mongering and to do the right thing. You have told parents to follow the science, hoping that science would back up your fear. Well, we're calling your bluff. The official journal of the American Academy of Pediatrics has published a peer-reviewed study including 100,000 children in North Carolina. Researchers found just 32 cases during a 9-week period, and 0 of those cases involved a child infecting an adult. Let me state that again, 0. Your teachers' union says to follow the science. Confirm the peer-reviewed study for yourself. The science is sound. We love our teachers, but the California Teachers Association is holding our good teachers hostage. They are afraid to speak out, and the CTA is using our children as bait in negotiations. The despicable actions of the California Teachers Association should be rejected by Modesto City Schools and all schools in California. Have some common sense. Think critically, like you say you want your students to. I implore you to do the right thing and to reopen our schools with no masks, barriers, or fear. Next comment is from an MCS first grade teacher. I am a first grade teacher for Modesto City Schools. I'm concerned with the hybrid hub merger being considered by Modesto City Schools. First, there was little notice of the possible merger given to staff. I was informed on Friday, February 19th. Teachers were not given the opportunity to provide input on the merger. While we all agree that school is the best place for students to be, we can also agree that we must give the students in our classroom the best instruction possible. Teaching live while having 9 first graders in class has been a challenge. To welcome even more students in person while teaching live will be ineffective. First graders need a lot of help while teaching. For example, most can't find pages in their books and need help. The problem is that when I get up to help my in-class students, my distance learners disengage. Then I spend several minutes getting my distance learners focused again. Checking online work is very time-consuming. My in-class students get bored, then talk amongst themselves. The more kids I have in person, the more difficult it becomes to teach kids online. Thankfully, kindergarten teachers have paraprofessional support in their classes. First grade teachers have no support, and it's desperately needed. I would prefer for students that wish to remain distance learners enroll in Modesto Virtual Academy. Although I would dearly miss my distance learners, I feel that this option would best meet the needs of both groups of students. Next comment we have is anonymous from an MCS teacher. It starts with a quote from the Stanislaus County Science Brief, updated February 12th, 2021. The quote is, similar to adults with SARS-CoV-2 infections, children can spread SARS-CoV-2 to others when they don't have symptoms or have mild, non-specific symptoms, and thus might not know that they are infected and infectious, end of quote. I have had 3 students in the last month with COVID-positive adults in their home. The children didn't get tested because they were required to stay home anyway under the guidelines. COVID is rampant here. Children transmit it. They are just not getting tested and have mild symptoms, and that's why you don't see it in the data. We see it, up close and personal. It's very stressful to have those possibly infectious students. While our county is still in purple/red with high rates of transmission, please consider your teachers, their families, and their health. Until the elementary teachers are vaccinated, we should not even consider adding fuel to the fire. Students already have the opportunity to come to school 4 to 5 days a week if they are included in the hubs. The instruction is no different if they are in the classroom, at home, or in the hub. The current model is keeping the staff as safe as possible. Why the sudden push to crowd the rooms? I personally would have at least 14 students. Whoever is pushing for this, Be transparent as to why. It's certainly not to keep your staff safe. Signed, a very concerned educator. The next comment comes from Mark and Tandy Peters. They are parents. The mental and emotional well-being of our children is equally as important as their physical well-being. Not that their physical well-being is even an issue, being that COVID has little to no effect on children. As parents of multiple MCS children, we plan to pull our children from the school district if schools do not reopen and do so without masks. There's nothing more demoralizing than to see anyone, especially a child, in a mask. The board is quickly making itself irrelevant by bowing down to the teachers' union. The union appears to be pushing a political agenda rather than a scientific approach, under the guise of looking out for our children's welfare and that of the teachers. The data and science that overwhelmingly show the need for our children to be attending school in person is being ignored. Surrounding districts have managed to safely reopen and are allowing children to receive the education our tax dollars are meant to provide, as well as the socialization children so desperately need and want. We ask that MCS does its job by reopening schools so that our children can attend the schools that we are paying for. Is it too much to ask that after a year, our children be back in school in person? Okay, the next comment is from Mark Etchbarn. I think I said that correctly. He's a parent. To whom it may concern, the time has come to fully open schools while at the same time implementing safety protocols for the staff and students. Moving into our 1-year anniversary of the COVID-19 shutdown, the data clearly shows children are safe and teachers and staff are also safe with practicing proper distancing and masks. No longer can we stand idle while education standards slip and children are literally being left behind, a slogan Modesto City Schools does not want. We, the parents of MCS students, implore you to do the right thing. Waivers have been approved in other districts. Distancing can be achieved. Politics can be set aside for the good of the youth. We demand answers and solutions. Lawyers, board of supervisors, city council members, etc., should not have to push educators to do their jobs. As fellow taxpayers, parents want more from our school district. Thank you. All right, next comment is from Carol and Bob Phillips. They are parents. Please open schools for full-time in-person learning. I know of so many students who are falling behind academically, socially, and emotionally. Businesses, figure how to open up. I know that you can too. Thank you for all that you do. The next comment is from Jennifer Franzia, also a parent. I'm a parent of a senior at Gregory High School. My daughter and her classmates have endured a year of substandard education, lack of academic interest, lack of social connection to their peers, and zero opportunity to build lasting senior year opportunities and memories, all for a virus with a greater than 99% survival rate. This is the same as the common flu. It does not take an epidemiologist to know these numbers. Currently in Escalon Unified, a neighboring community, almost 50% of 8th graders are not eligible to walk for their graduation. The irony being that Escalon kids are in school 4 days per week. I can only imagine what the percentage of failure rate is in Modesto City high schools. It must be astronomical. San Joaquin County has had worse numbers than Stanislaus, yet this small school district, Escalon, was able to get kids in school before Thanksgiving. Why can't MCS do the same? Even Sylvan School District appears to be more proactive. We all know this has to do with the teachers' union. Teachers are essential workers, period. If a cashier at McDonald's can serve food to hundreds of people per day, then teachers can teach. If a Starbucks barista can serve hundreds of customers per day, then teachers can teach. If they need to get vaccinated to feel safe, then vaccinate them and get them to work. Enough is enough. Our children need to be in school. I expect to hear about some aggressive and proactive measures from MCS in getting these kids in school ASAP. You are failing our children. I am sure one day in our future, this year of quarantining our children will go down as one of the biggest failures in our education system to date. You were elected as a school board member to represent the children in Modesto, not the Teachers Association. Please keep this in mind. Next comment is from Mike and Katherine Reynolds. They are parents. The children of MCS need and want their schools to be open. Please know that we support you in reopening. We understand the risks. We hope precautions such as using soap and water to wash hands before eating and after using the restroom will remain in place. Sanitizing classrooms and maintaining clean schools is understandable. The measures need to be taken to maintain this environment is achievable while allowing our students to participate in daily on-campus learning. I have 2 students thriving in the MVA program. However, I see the toll the lack of daily guidance and lack of social interaction has taken on them. We ask you to please take steps forward in the remainder of this school year so that we can start the 21-22 school year with full classroom access. Thank you. Next comment is from Nicholas Baker, a parent. Thank you, Dr. Contreras and Mr. Godot, for your honest communications last week. It's clear from the district's swift action and pivot to evaluating the possibilities of more in-person instruction days for our children that the voices of parents are being heard. Our shared frustrations with the California Department of Public Health's changing rules and our goal of returning to more in-person instruction days is a common thread for parents and the district. The rhetoric around teacher vaccinations that does not acknowledge the scarcity of vaccine supply, inequities with vaccine distribution, and the challenges of vaccine hesitancy only blurs what should be our razor-sharp focus on returning our children to more in-person instruction days. The data, our own MCS experience, and the experience of other districts shows this can be done safely. We've been encouraged to become more politically active and vocal. We've written letters, attended meetings, contacted state and federal representatives, challenged public health with questions, etc. We've heard repeatedly that other state agencies govern what we can and cannot do. It's no longer enough to plainly acknowledge these rules and live with them. It's time to challenge and change them. It's time to lead. If the district and our elected board members want to be strong advocates for our children by supporting a return to full in-person instruction, we invite you to co-sign a statement sent to our state officials demanding a change in how we can operate in the interest of our children. The next comment comes from Holly Phillips, a parent. Dear elected school officials, I have falsely entrusted our leaders for my kids' educational success and mental health. Distance learning is failing my children, wreaking havoc on families, and isolating kids from friends. My husband and I have always believed in the public schools. We desired our kids to live lives in the community, not in private bubbles. Now they are living chaotically back and forth from half a day of school to asynchronous learning, which is complete utter waste of a day, turn on computers, etc. My 4 kids are all on different schedules. None of them have the same breaks or lunch hour. My kids bounce on and off computers all day, distracted by the next kid who is going on break. My husband and I both work full-time jobs. It doesn't work. I am losing hope in our public schools. As a labor and delivery nurse, I never had the privilege to stay home or work remotely and continue delivering babies virtually. We have been flexible. We have made adjustments weekly and daily. Why are teachers exempt from this? Please hear us. Next comment comes from Sandra Mora, a parent. Dear school board, thank you for your service. We know you have a tough job navigating through our current situation and properly planning protocols for returning our kids safely to school. I have 2 children enrolled in Modesto City Schools' MVA program, and although they have been successful in it, the program is not for every child, especially lower elementary grades, as it can be very difficult to navigate the technology. I strongly believe it is now time to reopen the schools. I think it is in the best interest of my children and the greater community. We have learned that when it comes to kids, that they are not as infectious as adults are, and that they are hurting emotionally, academically, physically, and socially while they are isolated. Also, children with special needs learn best in school. I'm not minimizing the risk of COVID-19 in schools, but we have learned how to control risk, and parents are willing to be a part of the solution. I respect whatever decision you make because I know you are making decisions that are difficult and in the best interest of the teachers and children. The next comment is from Lisa Armour, a parent. Dear school board, please do what's so obviously best for the most kids in our city and open our schools full-time without kids looking at their teachers on a screen. You can still have an option for the families who don't feel safe sending kids to school. The first priority for our city should be taking care of kids, and keeping the schools closed is damaging our community. The most disadvantaged among us stand to lose the most. I will be taking my kids out of the district if I don't see the schools open before the end of the year, and that breaks my heart to say because I love our kids' neighborhood school and their amazing teachers. I'm losing faith in our public school system. Take a stand as leaders for what's best for the kids and families and open the schools. Next comment is from Angela Martinez, a teacher. This board approved a decision in November to open up 2 days a week using the concurrent teaching model. It meant that teachers would have to teach both online and in-person students at the same time. We are one of the only districts using this method. Other districts force parents to select hybrid or distance learning. We put the needs of our students first by keeping them with their only connection to school, their teacher. We understand the need to bring back our students for 4 days of in-person instruction. We are only asking that you don't offer 5 days of in-person instruction. It's important to explain why Wednesdays need to remain distance learning. Wednesdays are when teachers can focus on a single form of instruction. Small group interventions are held, assessments are given, and individual student needs can be met. Schedules for resource groups, IEP, and SST meetings and intervention groups are already built around Wednesday being a distance learning day. It's a crucial day for our teachers' emotional health and well-being. It's the one thing our teachers say they need and what we implore you to maintain. We voted on a plan no other district is doing, and this board needs to honor that model and finish the year supporting what the teachers need for success. If we are to continue concurrent instruction, then you must support the decision you put in place by maintaining Wednesdays as distance learning days. Thank you. Next comment is from Eppi Chung, who's a teacher. Since it seems the board is bowing to public pressure to reopen fully, please provide the following solutions to schools to meet the needs of the students. If you are opening because you are concerned about the social emotional needs of students, please have a full-time counselor at every elementary site to help our students. If you are opening because you are concerned about learning loss of our English learners, please have a specific EL coach at every elementary site to help these students. If you are opening, because you are concerned about unreported child abuse in the homes, please provide staff whose sole job is to file these claims and make the calls to CPS during the school day. The elementary school teacher might have difficulty doing these jobs, in addition to simultaneously teaching students in person and the students learning from home. Please help our students. Next comment is from Caitlin Murarino, a parent. As parents eager to get our children back to the classrooms, we were delighted to hear that MCS is reaching out to parents to find out how many students want to return to full in-person instruction. This transparency and feedback is one of the many things we have been asking for. While this is a welcome first step, we still have many questions. Is MCS prepared to fully reopen as quickly as we can once we get to the red tier? Is there a contingency plan to file a new waiver to make this happen regardless of the tier? What happens if 1 or 2 classrooms in a school cannot accommodate the 4 feet of social distancing required by the state, but others can? Why is the school day ending at 1:40 currently, and will we return to normal schedule? Will the teachers be simultaneously teaching virtually and in person, even if only 1 or 2 students from a class remain online? Is it possible to have 1 or 2 teachers from each grade level across the district teach all the students that want to remain online and allow for those children that are in person to have a more traditional classroom feel without the use of Chromebooks for assignments? What can we as parents do to assist in this process? For the sake of our children's overall well-being, we ask that you please continue to work diligently to make safe reopening of schools a top priority. Next comment is from Mark and Summer Niskanen, parents. Good afternoon. This comment is in regard to item B2 on your agenda, expanding in-person instruction for pre-K through 6 schools. My wife and I wholeheartedly are in support for expanding in-person instruction to 5 days per week. Our 2 children attend Enslin Elementary, and we have seen firsthand the effects of online learning and feel this online approach has gone on far too long. If it is frankly just not working, and we hope to never see it again for our children. It is not fair to continue to hold our kids hostage while numerous studies have shown that in-person learning does not pose a significant health risk. Again, we wholeheartedly support opening the schools, and given the option, our 2 children will certainly be attending Enslin Elementary for in-person instruction. We feel this is the only option at this point for the physical and mental health of our children. Please consider the 5-day per week option and allow our kids to be where they belong, in school for in-person instruction and learning. Next comment is from Darryl James, a high school teacher. Good evening. I would like to discuss the potential expansion of in-person days for our elementary students. As a high school teacher, I have concerns that you are considering expanding the number of in-person days for elementary when grades 7 through 12 have yet to return for any in-person instruction. This will be the 3rd teaching model that elementary teachers have had to adjust to in less than a school year. One concern is vaccination for the TK through 6 teachers. Now that the guidelines are age-based and with vaccine shipping delays, many of our elementary teachers will not receive their vaccines in time for an expanded return to in-person instruction. Another concern is the lack of a plan for when too many students elect to return for in-person instruction, thus exceeding the number allowed in a classroom to maintain safe physical distancing. Are you implementing a lottery system? How will you decide who gets to return and who doesn't if the grade level is already at capacity? How do you move forward with that plan in place? I have also heard concerns voiced by the elementary teachers of an expansion to a 5-day in-person plan, eliminating the Wednesday distance learning day. The Wednesday distance learning day is being maintained for 7 through 12 and should be for TK through 6 as well. With less than 3 months of school left, CASP testing ahead, and vaccinations on the horizon, I am asking that you seriously consider the concerns of the elementary school teachers. Thank you. This is an anonymous comment from an MCS parent. I believe that the science points to the safety of reopening schools with social distancing and masks. With that said, I tend to only hear from a small group of parents in the school district that I live in, and I am concerned that not all voices are at the table. I am 100% in support of reopening in-person instruction for students, but I am interested in hearing from teachers, particularly 7 through 12 teachers, where students will be changing classes throughout the day. I am also interested in hearing from families where students or members of their family may have health issues and are unable to return to in-person instruction. Do they believe that they are being treated equitably? I also hope that K through 12 educators are given priority in vaccinations as they become available in Phase 1B. Is there any chance that vaccinations could be given at school sites to make it easier for teachers? I believe that this is done for TB tests at some locations. I appreciate all of the work of the district, school site administrators, and teachers, and the parents who are advocating for their children. Next comment is from Debbie Vaughan, a retired MCS teacher. She taught for 35 years. Expanding in-person instruction days TK through 6 while allowing distance learning to continue for families who wish to remain at home under the current model is incomprehensible to me. TK through 6 teachers are already teaching in person while simultaneously teaching students online 4 days a week. This is a feat in itself. Teachers have Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, Friday cohorts, with Wednesday available to do small group instruction, call parents, prepare for the next group of students, deep clean rooms, monitor and adjust lessons, collaborate, and do testing. It is in no way a vacation day. It has merit and importance. TK through 6 teachers are doing an incredible job under the very trying and difficult circumstances. Wanting to expand in-person instruction seems like a well-of-course choice, but it can't happen with the current model. Teachers cannot be expected to expand in-person instruction days while continuing to do online learning as well. If the district wants to increase in-person instruction days, then parents need to decide if their children will attend school or be completely online. Virtual Academy is set up for students wanting online learning. The classroom teacher should not have to do both. However, if the district is going to continue the current hybrid model, then Wednesdays are an essential part of the success of TK through 6 teachers, which directly affects the success of our students. We need to make decisions that support the teachers in order for them to have the greatest success with their students. Next comment is from Audrey Baker, a parent. Thank you, MCS administration, for your efforts in the last 2 weeks. We appreciate your collaboration, and it is clear that you share our frustrations and concerns. It's becoming more evident that many MCS families are actively seeking education elsewhere for their children for 2021 if we cannot return to full-time in-person instruction. It is also evident that many roadblocks preventing us from doing so lie with the state, not with the district. We have been encouraged to write to state leadership, and many parents have done so. However, we entreat you to join us in that effort, as the voices of a handful of parents may or may not reach them. MCS is the 4th largest school district in the state. If this district and a large number of its parents are able to work together to reach our state government, we may be able to elicit change. Please work with us to make our state legislators realize our needs. Additionally, it is important that when we do achieve in-person learning, we must strive for the separation of in-class and online teaching. It is incredibly difficult for teachers to split their attention between the screen and students sitting in class, nor does it provide effective learning for students. This dual teaching system is not effective, and we request that a solution be found to allow teachers to fully focus on their in-person classrooms while other teachers be assigned 100% distance learning. Next comment is from Krista Salyer, a teacher at Downey High. To whom it may concern, it was brought to my attention that upon possible reopening this school year, students in high school will not maintain the current block schedule that we have been on since school started in August. It will instead be all periods 50 minutes each. As a teacher and parent of an MCS student, I feel we should stick to the current block schedule for ease of transition for all parties involved. I will be expected to teach those in the classroom and those still distancing virtually within this 50 minutes, which now includes sanitizing that will also take away from instruction time. We may need to add passing periods, which could possibly be taken from lunch or an earlier start. I don't have the answer to all, but would highly encourage you to remain status quo for the sanity of staff and students. Thank you. Next comment is from Elizabeth Justberg, a parent and Downey High teacher. I am a parent of MCS students in grades 8 and 12 and a teacher at Downey High. I would like to submit this public comment for this meeting. I am happy that our county's COVID numbers are decreasing so we can bring students in grades 7 through 12 back to in-person learning. I strongly believe that for this school year, all 7 through 12 schools should be on a block schedule, as they are now for distance learning, instead of attending all 6 periods each day. Blocks will decrease virus transmission with fewer students occupying the same seat each day and fewer passing periods. Fewer transitions per day will also make it easier for teachers to manage the live meetings for students at home while teaching in person at the same time. Thank you. Next comment is from Beth Thomas, a parent. Dear MCS Board of Education, we love our children. We know that good teachers do as well. It is time to get back to normal and reopen our schools full-time, 5 days per week. In parentheses, no masks, plexiglass barriers, or preaching fear of human contact to our children. Most parents wanted to do what was needed to be done for our community, but after a year of failed policy and hurting children, the time has come to put aside your fear-mongering and to do the right thing. While the percentage of children contracting or spreading the virus is negligible, the percentage of children with mental health issues due to a lack of socialization, sports, and extracurricular programs is far greater and should be a focus. Students of all ages have fallen behind academically due to a lack of in-school instruction. You know this and haven't done a thing about it. Unacceptable. We love our teachers, but the CTA is holding our good teachers hostage. They are afraid to speak out, and the CTA is using our children as bait in negotiations. The despicable actions of the CTA should be rejected by MCS. Have some common sense. Think critically and stand up for what is right. I implore you to do the right thing and to reopen our schools with no masks, barriers, or fear. If this doesn't happen, I and many other parents will be pulling my children from MCS. It's time to shift the focus back on our children. Next comment is from Ashley Wheatley, also a parent. Hello, my kids are starting to feel the effects of not being in school. They both do well at home, but they are starting to suffer socially and not being able to interact with other children their age in person. My oldest is in honors and GATE, and they tested my little one recently. I'm worried that he hasn't had enough hands-on teaching this year to pass the next test they are giving. He goes 2 days a week at Lakewood, but he's a hand-on learner and would benefit most from going full-time. Other schools in Stanislaus County are open 5 days a week for elementary, so I'm not sure why we can't be. Next comment is from Kim Durham, a Downey High teacher. I wanted the Modesto City School Board to know that I am not opposed to the reopening of 7 through 12, but I am opposed to the schedule that is being proposed for Downey High School, where we will see every period for 50 minutes each day. A 50-minute class period is not enough time to teach a lesson for the following reasons. There's 7 bullet points. It takes students 5 to 8 minutes to get logged into Teams meetings once a class has started. Number 2, if a student needs to open a computer on the program, it takes them 3 to 5 minutes to open up the program and be ready to go. 3, if the students are sanitizing at their desk at the start of class and at the end of class, and you use hand sanitizer as they enter and exit, I'm guessing that will eat up another 5 to 10 minutes of time. 4, if a student is having trouble with their computer and has to restart the meeting because their audio went out, or restart their computer because of a tech issue, that is another 3 to 5 minutes. 5, all of the above happening, I feel like this leaves us with about 30 minutes to teach a lesson, which doesn't leave time for students to practice what we are teaching in their lesson. 6, the way our rooms are set up, 5 sets of students will sit in the same seat each day. Our student desks are color-coded so that Monday, Tuesday students will sit at the yellow seats and Thursday, Friday students will sit at the green seats. 7, students and staff have finally figured out the best way to teach the blocks that we have been doing for 3/4 of the year, and now for that last possible 8 weeks, you want all of us to figure out a new system. This will definitely result in lost teaching time. I think the district needs to look at the current situation and allow the school staff needs to decide which schedule would be best for our students to finish out the school year. What we agreed to in August, when we all thought this would be over in a month or 2, is not what I think is the best thing for our students now. Okay. Oops. Next comment comes from a retired MCS teacher and grandparent. A concerned retired MCS teacher who has school-age grandchild in this district and an adult child teaching in this district, and that's all it says. So, next comment is from Jeremy Pla, a Downey High teacher. The proposed 6-period 3:15 p.m. end to the school day is not good for our kids, especially the ones that are involved in sports. That means that practice would start at 3:45 p.m. at the earliest, and kids would be leaving school around 6 p.m., still needing to get home to have dinner and do homework. Right now, we are 9:15 a.m. to 2:30 p.m. and have a 70-minute lunch. How do we go from that to 9 a.m. to 3:15 p.m. with a 45-minute lunch? Making up for lost time is going to even further harm students, athletes, teachers, and coaches. Next comment is from Sharon Reeve, a Downey High teacher. I am not opposed to reopening schools in person, but I am not wanting to see the periods 1 through 7 meeting for 50 minutes while trying to hybrid with students that are still distance learning. I would like to continue with the block schedule, at least for this year, as close to the schedule we are doing now. The block schedule will have fewer students changing classes, so to maintain more social distancing. It will help those who are still distance learning not to have to change to a new meeting for every class of that day. I think the change of schedule for 1 through 7 would create a more disruptive environment at this time, as we have had 3/4 of the year already on block schedule. Next comment is from Jennifer Doyle, a 1st grade teacher. Dear board members, please consider, like we did, starting school every aspect before sending students back 4 to 5 days a week. Right now, we are teaching anywhere from a few on campus to 12 while teaching students at home at the same time. I have 8 students that do not come to school at all, and my Wednesdays are spent on mostly catching up with them for all of our testing. 1st grade has at least 24 or more tests we give each child, and when our students are at school, we give them these tests throughout each trimester. The only time to give the online-only students and catch them up academically is our Wednesdays. This day is not just for cleaning in between cohorts. Please consider this when deciding to come back for more days. Next comment is from Kendall Graham, Downey High teacher. We started the year with a new block schedule. We have worked endlessly to adapt to the new block schedule and working continuously to engage our students. The idea of coming back to the classroom with a hybrid student population is going to be a stressful enough task for teachers. The idea of doing that with a 50-minute class time seems ludicrous. Excuse me. The students have been fostered and supported along through the year in a block format. To switch to a standard 50-minute period is not an educationally sound idea. Next comment comes from Patricia Staley, parent of a high school freshman and senior. I write today to discuss my frustrations with the lack of in-person instruction and the continuing battle it has been with my high school age students with distance learning. I have watched my highly motivated students struggle with depression, anxiety, lack of motivation, and difficulty just doing their everyday tasks required of them for distance learning. I have watched in frustration that there is little I can do to help when they struggle with concepts and getting responses from teachers about getting help. I am a proactive parent and have done everything in my power to help them with any mental and physical needs, but this has been difficult to continue to hope that they will be able to return to the classroom, which they need so badly. Excuse me. I would ask that you please consider opening the 7 through 12 student schools quickly, or provide some way to provide the distance learning so that teachers can video and record their class sessions during the week so that students can return to concepts during a class that they did not understand. These students deserve better than what they have now. The first priority should be the well-being of these children and students and giving them our best effort to get them back into the classroom. Next comment is from John Phillips, an MCS high school teacher. Good evening. As a high school teacher in MCS, I would like to strongly urge you to not confirm the proposed traditional schedule if we reopen this school year. Students have already been through enough change this year. You have no idea how long it took to get them accustomed to this current schedule. Further changes will be deeply unfair and confusing to them. I would also encourage the board to abide by its original plan to reopen only after 2 full weeks in the red tier for junior high schools and 2 weeks after that for high schools. We need more time for teachers to receive both vaccinations. We need more than 5 days to determine if new spikes will occur. We need more time to determine which students will return on which days and which will opt to remain at home fully online. We need more time. Students and parents must also be made fully aware that in-person instruction will have to be largely identical to their at-home online instruction owing to the hybrid model. There will be no normal in-person instruction this school year, regardless of whether we return to the red tier. Thank you for your time. Next comment comes from Richard Jones, a parent. Board members, MCS has once again put the reopening cart before the horse and given false hope to community members for a full reopening of elementary schools. On Friday, an announcement was made that schools may reopen at full capacity by mid-March. There are a few problems with this announcement. First, the district has yet to reach out to the community to see how many parents would be willing to expose their children to this setting. Many of us are comfortable with smaller cohorts, but would not want to subject our children to crowded buildings. Perhaps a simple survey might have given you some insight. Second, given the need for spacing between students, a full capacity reopening seems like an unlikely possibility. How will you guarantee 4 feet of spacing in these classrooms? What will happen to kids if there aren't enough seats in a room? Finally, why would you push so fast to fill classrooms when settings like restaurants, movie theaters, and other locations are capped at 25% capacity in the red tier? I find it hypocritical that this very board meeting has extremely limited capacity, but you all feel comfortable subjecting kids to a different standard. Perhaps it would be better to wait for lower transmission rates as opposed to doing something just because you can. If the district would spend more time reaching out to parents, then they may know this info ahead of time. Thank you. Next comment comes from Letta Ka, a first grade teacher at Everett Elementary. It is my understanding that the district is proposing to merge our student cohorts to increase the number of in-person instruction days perhaps 4 to 5 days per week. As a teacher with 1/3 of my students who are still 100% in distance learning, I have valued my Wednesdays and hope that it can still remain the same. On top of my whole class teaching, my Wednesdays allows me to work closely with students who aren't in the classroom, meeting one-on-one, conducting small groups, giving assessments, etc. To be honest, I have no idea how I would be able to make up this time if we are planning to have students return to instruction 5 days per week. Next comment is from Lori Paul. Thank you for considering the logistics, preparations, and safety of increasing elementary in-person school days to 4 to 5 days a week. It's understandable that parents need to make a commitment for the remainder of the school year in order for schools to determine capacity, etc. And it makes sense that if classrooms are at or near capacity, families who have committed to distance learning cannot later decide to go in person. But I would like to request that families who commit to in-person will be able to switch back to distance learning for part or all of the remainder of the year if circumstances necessitate, such as parents, we often know when our children are feeling, in quotes, off. But without particular symptoms of sickness, they'll likely go to school anyway. Or if our kids have a runny nose, but no fever or other concerning symptoms, they'll go to school. But now that off feeling or runny nose might be COVID. It would be ideal if we could choose distance learning for a day or a week or whatever we as parents feel is necessary without being penalized with absences. Or perhaps a family member has been exposed, but the student was not directly exposed. This would not require a quarantine for the student, but a cautious parent might wish to choose distance learning for a time just to be safe. Please consider allowing families who commit to in-person learning now to be able to revert back to distance learning when necessary. Thank you. Next comment is from Jonathan Burton, a Downey High teacher. Good afternoon. I wanted to voice some concerns about the proposed schedule for instruction for Downey High School when partial in-person instruction resumes. We all look forward to the return of our students to campus, and we all want the best possible environment for them. I understand the assumption that we would return to an every period, every day schedule with in-person instruction, as my understanding of the union contract is that we would have to have a vote of the staff to adopt a block schedule. However, we will be in a hybrid situation, so I think there is justification to stay with the current schedule without having to go through a vote, since we went to the block schedule for online instruction without a vote. Personally, I prefer the block anyway, so I am in favor of staying on it regardless. Having said that, even if I wasn't, I would still not want to change it right now. Every change is a transition, and every transition leads, at least temporarily, to a degradation in learning and instruction until people have had time to adapt to it. We've adapted to the block schedule, and that is the schedule that will best optimize learning and instruction right now. Switching to a new schedule while simultaneously switching to hybrid instruction will lead to significant disruption in learning and instruction. Switching to hybrid instruction will be challenging enough. This double change is simply not in the best interest of our students. Thank you. Okay, next comment comes from Diane Rodriguez, a MCS teacher who's been here over 20 years. This year has been challenging for most of us. I have to say that I have some concerns for the way decisions have been made. We were barely informed about the changes and heard the union was also not informed of the release of the email. I am surprised of how everyone is making these decisions, yet no one is speaking to the actual people, the MCS employees, that it actually affects. We elementary teachers have been given an enormous task this year to learn the technology and present curriculum in an unconventional way, both in person and online. Now we are being given another task to handle more students. It has taken most weekends and evenings of our own time to develop lessons that our curriculum doesn't meet for online learning. I am in support of having my students in the classroom, but please do not take away the Wednesday that we need to plan and collaborate with our grade level teachers. Having relatives in the high school level, they tell me that they teach 2, maybe 3 classes a day. I watch my high school daughter's classes. Most teachers are only online with them for 10 to 15 minutes of their 80-minute class time. As elementary teachers, we are online all day, or we risk losing our students. Please do not take away the time we need to prep, collaborate, and work with coaches. This is valuable time that we use to make it through each week. Next comment is from Philip Rodriguez, an MCS teacher. Hello, I am writing with concern the proposed schedule for Downey, Bayer, Enox, and Modesto. To sum it up, this is not okay and is not working towards goal 3. If you ask these schools, they will tell you that they would like to keep the block schedule as it is for just this year. Next year, if things are somewhat normal, then return to the traditional schedule, but not now. Changing things again on the students and staff will add to their already high stress level. Please reconsider this proposal and get input from those in the trenches. Next comment is from a Muir Elementary teacher. It is my firm belief that combining cohorts is not safe, appropriate, or acceptable. Firstly, we are still in the purple tier with infection rates very high. Secondly, we as teachers and staff are not yet vaccinated and therefore safe from getting COVID while teaching in the classroom. The fact that it's being considered before then is suspect to staff safety and well-being. Thirdly, it's proven to be difficult to keep the elementary kids to properly social distance with only 7 to 10 kids, let alone doubling that from combining the two cohorts. Fourth, it is highly questionable what MCS motives are in pushing this agenda when other county districts, also in the purple tier, are still in 100% remote learning. It is my understanding that board members are still using conference modes of communication when school staff don't have that luxury. So it would be my most sincere hopes that our board members would not accept this new agenda as appropriate or safe. Thank you. Next comment is from Kristen Tamores, a parent. Bring our children back to school. This is not a working system for a majority of the students. I am fortunate to be able to stay home with mine, and they are still struggling. This is frustrating and holding our children back. It is important for the children and staff who want to come back to be able to do so. The online schooling we are left with is not a good system and is very problematic. It is hard to believe a better option could not be figured out. If private schools are operating, our public schools should be also. Next comment is from Kayla Mueller, a parent. Please open the schools full-time. None of this half day, 2 days a week. For those that don't want to go back, both teachers and students, fine. Let them do social distancing. But stop this insane school distance learning that is not working for those of us that need to be in a classroom full-time 5 days a week. My daughter is a junior in high school and has already said she will take her GED if school does not open back up full-time for the next school year. This last year has been the biggest waste. Private schools are in and making it work. No reason at all you cannot do the same. Do your job. How have any of you kept your jobs this long is mind-blowing. Open up full-time. My daughter's mental health is suffering, and her grades that she has never had a problem with are suffering. You are all to blame for every single one of these kids' failures. And the last comment is from Melody McGill, a teacher at Roosevelt Junior High School. This was a phone message. I apologize for calling afternoon, but I did not realize that there was going to be a special board meeting this evening. Had I known that, I would have made this phone call or sent an email on Friday, but I did not find out until today. I have a problem with starting a zero period class at 7:25 a.m. for 7th and 8th grade students. I am not really sure why we have to start at 7:25 a.m., but the high schools don't have to start until 8:05 a.m. We are currently working at 7:50 a.m. I've lost a number of students because it's that early in the morning from the class, which is really sad, so I would appreciate coming up with a different solution other than meeting at 7:25 a.m. And that is all the public comments.
Ms. Noonan, thank you so much for reading all of those comments. I think it's important to hear everything that people are saying. I know this took a long time, but I appreciate everyone who took the time to send an email or to call in to let us know how you feel about these issues. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to B1, and this is an approval plan to reopen 712 schools for in-person instruction. And Mr. Godot, would you like to present, please?
It's It's going to start with me. So it had Mr. Godot's name on the agenda.
If we
but
could
I
get
will
the
kick it off.
PowerPoint
It's
over there.
yes. Okay, so good evening, Board of Trustees, President West, Cabinet, Dr. Noguchi, and everyone who's watching online. My name is Krista Noonan. I'm the Chief Communications Officer, and tonight we are pleased to provide you an update on our 712's Safe Schools Reopening Plan. We'll be going through, it's a bit of a recap of what we've done previously, but we feel that that's valuable to be able to give you some updates as well as some of the changes. We have an updated reopening timeline, and then lastly, we'll be asking for your approval on the plan. Next slide, Mr. Godot. And just to real quickly recap how this aligns to the district goals 1 and 3, and you can see those there, but it's definitely very important for us as we move forward. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to transition this next slide to Associate Superintendent of Student Support Services, Mr. Mark Herbst. He'll be going through a couple of the slides to be able to give you an update on the prevention measures that we're taking and so forth.
Thank you so much. The 712 reopening plan really focuses heavily on prevention. So I'm going to talk a little bit about physical distancing. I'm going to talk about entrance and egress, transportation, and a couple other pieces that are going to be valuable for you to know going in. Next slide, please, Mr. Godot. In terms of, Brett, I need one more. I'm sorry, one back to the slide. In terms of physical distancing, the 712 plan will include 4 to 6 feet social distancing to the greatest extent possible. Secondary sites are also going to need to address the entrance and the egress within their school sites, basically the paths of travel that our students are going to follow as they enter and exit our schools. In terms of transportation protocols, Got it? Okay. Well, that's okay. Either way. In terms of transportation protocols, we are still going to insist that students wear masks the entire time that they ride one of our buses. And as stated previously, we fully recognize that causes problems just by sheer numbers of the individuals who ride our school buses. So therefore, we do still ask that our parents, to the greatest extent possible, transport our kids when applicable. So that's still something that's consistent. Next slide, please. And I'm on the one with hygiene. In terms of any hygiene measures, there's going to be a heavy reliance on hand washing and hand sanitization. We also, one difference is that obviously with the students coming in and out of an individual class period, we're working on a plan that insists that the students clean their desks daily when entering and exiting. Like the elementary schools, we are insisting that all students wear face masks with a couple of exceptions. Those exceptions would be situations to where an individual may have a medical exemption, or in some cases, students with disabilities who by nature of their disability and the severity of the disability is unable to wear the mask. But I will tell you truthfully, with our experience in the elementary, we're pretty pleased with our students with disabilities and their ability to wear masks or at minimum a face shield. Next slide, please. In terms of the staff training, a slew of resources that have been provided. Special thanks to Krista Noonan, obviously, Aurora Licudini, our nurse chairperson, who has spent considerable time with a lot of valuable training resources that covers topics like mask wearing, hand washing guidelines, and a lot of other important information that's valuable for our families to know going in. Next slide. Additionally, we have that student symptom decision tree, and our families will be provided this. And it's truly a benefit. I know most of you guys have seen the document, but the document really outlines what a parent should do when and if they suspect that a child may have COVID or COVID-like symptoms. So it kind of outlines the process and what they need to do. Very, very useful tool for our families. Very, very useful tool for our school staff as well. Next slide, please. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Zierli.
Thank you, Mark.
As far as cleaning and disinfecting of our 712 schools, we'll be following the same health safety measures we're using currently at our TK6 schools, with the exception of the last bullet on this slide. As Mr. Herbst pointed out, because we are on a period by period rotation at the 712 level, we are adding disinfecting wipes to the classrooms to be used where it says here either at the end or the beginning of class period. We believe, for example, if the student comes in and grabs a sanitizing wipe, that way that student can ensure that his or her desk has been wiped down as they sit on it for that period. So it can be either or, but if we do it at the beginning of each period, that would guarantee that that student's desk has been sanitized for their use for that period. Next slide. We will continue to have contactless thermometers available at each school that can be used when students display symptoms. And again, we're going to be asking our 7 to 12 student population every day before coming to school to do a self COVID-19 symptom screening before they come to school that day. And we will ask our students to not come to school if they are experiencing a temperature above 100.4 degrees, have a cough, shortness of breath, or other respiratory illnesses. And now I believe I'm going back to Mr. Herbst.
You are. As this board is aware, we are very, very pleased with the not only the level, but the time that we were able to get set up, our ability to test our staff. So as the board is well aware, we test our staff on a week-to-week basis, anywhere from 1 to 2 times, depending on the demand. During that time, they take a saliva test and can get their results back quickly. So that will continue for our staff on a voluntary basis through this process. If a child is experiencing symptoms, we still push them back, at least initially, to their primary care physician or one of the county places to get a COVID test. At this time, there are not plans, or I should say we are not testing students at this time. Next slide.
Next is what happens when we do have COVID cases, when there is an exposure and a staff member, for example, is tested and they receive a negative test result. That individual will stay in quarantine for 10 days after the initial exposure. There's some contact tracing process that occurs. When there are positive test results, an individual can return to school campus 10 days after their symptoms first appeared and at least 24 hours with no fever or use of fever-reducing medications, and their symptoms have been improving. County Public Health also continually works with and provides MCS and individuals with guidance on quarantining and contact tracing. As a reminder, close contact is defined as being within 6 feet for 15 or more minutes or direct physical contact with or without a mask to someone who has COVID or has an exposure. And we continue to work with County Public Health. Contacts will be traced and notified to quarantine. Our contact tracing team is constantly in contact with the County Department of Health. And through that process, we maintained confidentiality of all the information related to individual diagnoses. And next up, back to Ms. Noonan.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Henderson. This is just another recap again of the procedures that we go through, as Mr. Henderson mentioned, with public health in terms of if there are cases at a school site or within a class cohort, the different percentages that we have to reach. So the threshold, for example, for closing multiple cohorts or at a actual campus, a school campus, is 5% across the entire campus. But if there are isolated incidents, for example, with smaller class cohorts, we may quarantine several members of those classes. And then if we were to have to close the entire district, that would be the threshold of 25% or more within the schools at the district, then it would have a 10-day closure. This, you may recall, it used to be 14 days, but the public health guidance was updated to 10 days. So that's the procedure that we go through, working very closely with public health. Next slide. We also have a very intricate communication framework, and as part of the updated guidance that was received through California Department of Public Health and OSHA, which is the labor organization that governs occupational safety within the workplace, we are required to notify anyone who had the potential of being exposed within 24 hours of us receiving that notification. And we have a very finely tuned process that we go through to ensure that that is fulfilled. And I really do commend the site principals and the assistant principals and vice principals. They've done a wonderful job. Aurora Lucadini, our lead nurse, and Mr. Herbst as well. It's definitely been a great process that we've put together. So now what I'm going to do, and the other thing I should mention as well, is we also provide that communication in the family's home language, which is definitely a great resource that the sites are offering us. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. Godot, and he'll go through the learning models, the hybrid model.
Good evening, Board. So as you'll recall, over the last 6 or 7 months, we've spent a great deal of time and resources collecting input from our various stakeholders. We've conducted a number of surveys going all the way back into the spring of last year and ramping up in the fall what the hybrid instructional model that would fit the needs of our families as well as our district and our teachers in the classroom. We conducted a number of virtual forums collecting input from our stakeholders, including our staff and community. And then we've been engaging in collaborative conversations with our certificated and classified leadership teams over the last couple of months. So for our 7-12 reopening student cohort model, you'll notice some similarities between what we're employing at the TK6 level. Looking at keeping 2 cohorts of students, half the students attending in person on Monday and Tuesday. In the chart on the PowerPoint, you see Group A. In the blue row there shows at school in-person learning, and then those students that are in cohort B would be at home learning, receiving concurrent instruction with those in the classroom. Conversely, on Thursday and Friday, that same cohort A would be at home, doing learning, distance learning concurrently with the instruction taking place in the classroom, while our cohort B would be receiving in-person learning. Now, the key to this model here is that our families and our parents have choice. That is a big bonus of our hybrid instructional model at 712 in Modesto City Schools, so that our parents can make that decision based on the information that they have. I do want to point out that the Wednesday schedule outlined here on this slide is not accurate. It is distance learning. Wednesday is taking place in a distance learning format. But the next slides you'll see will more clearly outline what the Wednesday instructional model looks like. So key to this is that the cohorts are going to be determined by grade level alpha order. Now there may be some extenuating circumstances that might necessitate a family, for example, with multiple students in the home with different last names. We would want students from the same immediate family attending physically on the same cohort days. So we will be setting up those systems at the site level. Go to the next slide. So this slide will show you the 7-8 traditional schedule layout for our junior highs. The times for the start of the school day are a little bit different than what you might see in a traditional schedule. We made the conscious decision to put the start and ends on the 5-minute marks on the watch, just to make it easier for our students at home, those that are choosing to stay home in distance learning, to have a better understanding. Is it 8:32 or is it 8:35? Monday and Tuesday cohorts, you can see the blue cohort or the A cohort would attend in person on Monday, Tuesday, as I previously explained, and the gold cohort or the B cohort on Thursday and Friday. The Wednesday schedule off to the side is our distance learning schedule. Wednesdays, it's the same schedule for all students 7-12. So you'll see it included on the preceding slides from this, but you'll note that it is the same schedule. We have taken a look at moving collaboration into the morning. Currently, it's taking place at the end of the school day, but we are going to move that to the morning to start the day with collaboration, preceded by the virtual in-person distance learning schedule. So next slide, we've got our traditional 9-12 hybrid schedule. This schedule would apply to Bayer, Downey, Enox, and Modesto High School. Transitioning back to the traditional schedule that they followed prior to COVID-19. However, obviously the key difference here is that they're still being cohorted where only a maximum of half the students would be in attendance on Monday, Tuesday in that cohort. Again, the same thing on Thursday, Friday. Transitioning now to our high school block schedule schools, Davis, Grigori, and Johansson. Again, similar modeling of the block schedule, same processes in place where we're putting the start and end times of the period on the 5 of the clock dial every 5 minutes. You'll notice that Davis, Grigori, and Johansson, the start time for first period is a little bit later in the morning. Our traditional schools are starting at 9, our block schedule's at 9:10. That was to accommodate some transportation processes for Davis and Grigori High School. Again, same Wednesday distance learning schedule for all. Another key difference between the block schedule and the traditional high school schedule is that in the block, the 0 and 8th period classes are able to take place before first period in the morning, where the traditional schedule has 0 period aligned before first period and 8th period at the end of the instructional day. And last but certainly not least, our Elliott bell schedule. Similar to a traditional schedule, similar to what they would have seen pre-COVID at Elliott, again with the Wednesday collaboration schedule aligned with the rest of the schools. So with that, I'm going to transition back to Ms. Noonan.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Godot. So now what I'm going to do, there is one thing I think we've all been accustomed to with COVID is many changes coming our way in terms of updated guidance from health officials and which guidance is which. And I want to reiterate that as a district in the state of California, we do take our guidance and our guidelines from both the state and the county health officials. I know CDC issued recommendations on February 12th, but what I'm going to talk to you about right now is specific to the state and county public health guidance. As you can see, the state is still using the colored tiers. Those had kind of been put on hold when we went into the stay-at-home order back in December, but now that the rates have come down some, now they've deferred back to the colored tiers. But one change that was made on January 14th of this year is you no longer have to wait a more significant time once a county reaches the red tier. We are currently in the purple tier, which I will show you in just a moment. But now, once Stanislaus County reaches the red tier, the new guidelines state that we need to be there for 5 consecutive days before 7 through 12 schools can look at reopening. So that's the update on that guideline. The next slide shows you, as promised, where Stanislaus County is currently. And I know it's very hard to see, but according to the state, remember they've grouped counties into different regions. So we are considered part of the San Joaquin Valley region. So Department of Public Health still releases their data every Tuesday. So tomorrow will be the updated data, and I will anxiously get online. It's usually released around midday, around lunchtime. But right now, as of last week, and by the way, I will also watch the Board of Supervisors meeting tomorrow morning. Our public health officer, Dr. Wei Champagne, she always gives a really great update in that as well. So as of last week, our case rate adjusted for the tier that we're in is 31.3 cases per 100,000, and our 7-day positivity rate is 9%. And as you could see on, if you go back to the previous slide, it'll show you where we need to shift in order to get to the different tiers. So that just gives you an idea of where we are right now. But I will be monitoring it for tomorrow and be able to give an additional update in a board communication. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn it back to Mr. Godot, and he will go through the proposed timeline.
Thank you, Ms. Noonan. So as was previously stated, the previous California Department of Public Health guidance stated that our junior high and high schools could be reopened after 14 days in the red tier. And that was the guidance that we followed and adhered to when we presented our reopening 712 plan back in November. However, the new guidance that was issued on January 14th allows for the reopening of our junior high and high schools in a hybrid cohort model after 5 days in the red tier. And our county estimates that we may reach the red tier in mid-March. So as you'll recall, the previous recommendation was a staggered start for our junior high and high schools. Our updated recommendation aligns our 712 schools to start on the same date in a hybrid cohort model. Now that date is going to be TBD because it's obviously aligned to the sixth day, being able to start the sixth day in the red tier. The important thing to note here is we know a lot more now than we knew back in October and November when we were looking at how to restart junior high and high schools. And that was really one of the primers behind our recommendation of staggering the start of our junior high and high schools. But we recognize now that there are protocols and procedures in place. We've learned from our TK6 school sites on how they've done with cohorting and that. There are similarities, but clearly there are some differences. But we do feel comfortable with the idea of opening or reopening 712 schools on the sixth day in the red. So what are our next steps? Our next steps are continue working with our labor partners. This is an ongoing process. We've met 3 times since last Tuesday. Some of that focus has been on 712. Some of that focus has been on TK6. We are verifying all the necessary supplies and materials, really double checking. A lot of this work in preparing for the reopening of 712 started all the way back in November as far as physically setting up classrooms, getting desk shields installed, ensuring that every classroom has sanitation supplies in place, etc. We need to continue to develop, or we are continuing to develop and support our students, parents, and staff with what the cohort model looks like. For example, our CIPD team is working to put together similar instructional model videos. If you recall, we watched the Buzz Lightyear themed, this is what concurrent instruction looks like. We felt like maybe we would kind of update that for our 712 community. We're going to continue ongoing coordination and reopening planning with our sites so that they're dotting the I's, crossing the T's, putting everything in place that needs to be in place for reopening. And of course, communicating with our families on what that reopening plan looks like. Key to this is training our students. We have to work together if we want to stay open. And our kids want to be back in school. So finally, we will be conducting some community and staff Q&A online meetings over the next week and a half. We've got one scheduled for the 25th this week for our staff, as well as next week for our parents on March 2nd, as well as additional online information coming soon. So with that, our recommendation this evening is that we open 712 schools in a hybrid 2-day per week model in alignment with current CDPH or county public health guidance. The current guidance states 5 consecutive days in the red, but we did add that or in alignment with current CDPH or county public health guidance in case there is a change to a tiered system. We don't have any insider information on that, but just things change so rapidly. We wanted to be prepared to reopen 712 without necessarily having to come back to a board meeting to align it with the current guidance. So with that, I think we are happy to take your questions.
Thank you for that report, all of you. We have trustee Marks.
Good evening.
Questions?
Welcome. Great to see so many of you out there. I counted there's 17 of us in here, so just for the public if they can't see the whole thing. So I had a question. Great report to help us understand what's going on and where we're headed. I have a question about some of the parents or teachers that were asking about the block schedule. How are the block schedules determined at the school sites? And then I have another question about, after that, about how do we determine the class sizes and how many students can be in a classroom? I know we have to divide it up, but I didn't know if it's just airspace or cubic square footage or whatever, but I know it's 4 feet apart, that the space on the ground determines a lot, so.
So in working to determine the traditional or block schedules at our high schools, that was worked out in conjunction with our labor partners, Modesto Teachers Association, to determine what that would look like at each of the schools. So that was a collaborative conversation.
Okay, that's interesting.
Additionally, the class size question, how many students per class size, we had to start with how we break out that cohort. And at 712, as you know, multi-period day schedule, looking at how might we get the closest we can to half the students on campus. However, recognizing that the day-to-day or the period-by-period attendance in those classes will be dictated by the master schedule. So we started with grade level alpha, so that our most of our core grade level classes, we believe that will be the closest we can get to, getting about half the kids in each period. Every classroom will be set up for social distancing, and we'll do that to the extent possible, but the master schedule will dictate how students move through the day.
Okay.
Can I add a
Yeah.
little bit on the block schedule question, to add to what Mr. Godot said? In a non-pandemic year, there's contract language about schedules and a vote that can be taken, and it really has to be kind of grassroots from the staff to be able to vote on a change to the block schedule. There's something specific in the contract with that. And as we were having the discussions with the bargaining unit, our labor partners, that it was apparent that there are teachers who would like to stay in the current time period, but there are equally many teachers who express frustration about the 80 minutes and being difficult to keep students engaged. So the way we settled was to return to the similar to the schedule that they have under normal circumstances. So our traditional schools back to a more traditional schedule, our block schools back to a block schedule similar to what they have outside of the current COVID environment.
So even if they'd had the whole year so far on block schedule, they wanted to go back to traditional, or the majority who voted at that school site or were vocal, that's how it was determined? Because it's odd that we had so many comments from only one school about retaining block schedule tonight, Downey being that school. So just wondering how, it's just hard to see how that happened where it's traditional instead of block that they were used to. And I don't know how many teachers are at the school site, but maybe these are the ones that wanted to continue on with the block, so.
I'd estimate about 80 teachers,
Okay.
somewhere about there, 70,
Yeah.
80 teachers at Downey. And yes, they have been to the point of trying to acclimate to the 80-minute structure, but I guess an argument could be made, they have always been a traditional schedule school site as well. So for those teachers that have been trying to make it work,
Right.
there could equally be many of them who don't feel as those who presented public comment did. We're not, we didn't delve into that and take a poll of the site or anything. It was just a discussion that to return things to some normal semblance of what their regular schedule would be is where we started.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Trustee Irvin?
block scheduling question was answered with Trustee Marks.
Mike, turn your mic on. I can't hear you.
Me.
There we go. Okay.
I just wanted to know how was the 2-day per week model decided on in terms of between like a 4 or 3-day or 4-day model to start out with? Where did the 2 come up?
Maintaining the equal number of in-person instructional day opportunities for students based on a cohort model, and having that Wednesday gap between in-person to provide for more robust sanitization and cleaning, as well as transitioning from one cohort to the next cohort if we've got to do contact tracing, those types of things.
Yeah. Okay, but wouldn't 4-day still give that Wednesday off, that Wednesday?
If we went 4 days of in-person at 7/12, we would have the full student population. Well, not the full, because some students would still have choice. But that's the part of kind of going in graded or phased in approach to identifying that we can do this well. With half the students coming on Monday and Tuesday and half the students coming on Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
Trustee Maestas?
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
All right, perfect. Thanks. So I've got 2 questions. Thank you, by the way, for putting this all together. It's very detailed, so thank you so much. So my 2 questions is, the first one, back on the block. That site that we had so many comments about the block, would it be a site option? Could the site decide, like, together and vote together that they want to continue on the block instead of going back to the traditional? And then after you answer that question, I have one more question.
Yeah, I'll respond to that. Since we're still on the block, I will mention that during the COVID schedule, it was an 80-minute period, and the block schedule for our other schools that normally have block, those are 100 minutes per period. So that was just another piece of the adjustment. I also think that, folks have been through a lot of change, and yet another change, as opposed to going back to something they're more familiar with, was part of that rationale as well. So to answer your question, yes, the contract language would allow, under normal circumstances outside of COVID, for a site, they have to reach a certain threshold of the ability of or the percentage of staff voting to move to a block schedule. The only language that exists is non-COVID, and there's a January deadline. When that language was negotiated, it was because if we were going to make what was at that time a fairly substantial change to a whole school's master schedule and way of functioning, we need to know at the latest at the end of January so we can make all of the necessary adjustments and preparations to move from a traditional to a block schedule. That really is the language that is in the contract right now. We don't have anything specific to state, is there a process to change a schedule during a block, during the pandemic. All of these things we're talking about relative to schedule and school function and structure are being accomplished outside of the contract through letters of agreement. So if that's something the bargaining unit was interested in pursuing, we would engage with them on that question. Can it happen? Technically, sure. How many of the staff at a given school site feel the way that we heard from some tonight, I don't know the percentage at that school.
Okay, thank you. So here's my other question. We know that through a lot of this research that's been done, all of the research, in fact, has stated that the schools can reopen safely if mitigation are followed. Mask wearing, social distancing, that's where we get this 4 to 6 feet within the classrooms. The classes that I'm most concerned about with the social distancing when we come back for 7-12 are the high school classes that are mixed grade. So we know that, your Algebra 2 class might have students from 4 grade levels in that class, or a drama class, things like that. Is there anything in place, is there a plan for, we bring half the students back, but this one class that has mixed grade levels has 20 students that can't possibly fit in a classroom with social distancing. What is the plan for something that crops up like that?
So to the extent possible, we'll also, if there are similar classes in the same period, or not similar, but the same class, so what would be an example? Say Art 1 class that would have multiple grade levels taking the same class. If there's a complementary first period Art 1 class, and we're seeing that cohorts in that period have a much higher level of in-person attendance on Monday and Tuesday, and the other one and the other class has room, then we may look at moving some of those students that are choosing to come in person to the other class. There are a number of strategies that we would employ like that. Not one that would apply to every scenario, but again, there will be class periods that will have students that will, be under the 6 feet social distancing, 4 to 6 feet. It just depends on how many students are showing up. The other mitigation strategies, sanitizing the desks, frequent hand washing and sanitization, mask wearing at all times, those things are part of that health and safety protocol process as well.
Thank you.
Not everyone has lights, so I'm going to just go by show of hands. And Trustee Brown?
Back to the question about the block scheduling and traditional scheduling. Am I hearing correctly that we have had some schools who have been using the block schedule for distance learning and others that have not?
No, all schools currently in distance learning 712 are using a block schedule. When we return to in-person on the 6th day of the red tier, those schools that were a traditional bell schedule prior to COVID are going to return to the recommendations. They return to that traditional schedule. Those that were previously a block, Grigori, Johansson, and Davis, they'll return, they'll stay in a block schedule. The times are off a bit, but yes.
So those schools have previously been on a block schedule?
Correct.
Okay.
So just think of that in terms of pre-COVID versus now, distance learning. In distance learning, everybody's on a block schedule, but pre-COVID, they were on a traditional at some of those schools, and that was the desire, was to come back to something that was more familiar when they've got in-person instruction taking place throughout the day.
So we heard numerous teachers and many of them from the same site, but if there was interest, and have we polled the teachers at all school sites to find out if they would prefer teaching on the block? Or is that even an option? Or is that too complicated at this point?
Yeah, we would have to re-engage with MTA on that. I will say this: one of the concerns was we're surveying our folks a lot, and this is bigger than a survey. This is a vote. That type of situation when we engage in looking at transitioning the school from a traditional schedule to a block, as Mr. Henderson was explaining, under normal circumstances. And I want to say, don't hold me to this, but the threshold is somewhere around 80%, plus or minus. I don't have the contract in front of me. That's a significant number to hit if we're talking about polling a site to determine where they want to be. So to engage in that process of a vote, and then in the meantime looking to potentially reopen high schools in 2 to 3 weeks, that was a little bit of a challenge as well. Going through a process like that, creating the master schedule, and it's, when I say create the master schedule, it's going in and actually putting in that daily period schedule into Power School, as well as in servicing staff on changes and that type of thing. So is it theoretically possible? Yes. Would it be a challenge? Indeed.
Trustee Mejia?
Yes, I just want to, I know there were several comments on the Wednesday. So Wednesday will stay the same. Is that, just to make clear? Well, they'll be online so teachers have time to do what they were mentioning in the comments. Is that?
That is correct. It'll be a distance learning day for all students.
Trustee Lopez.
Yeah, so I want to ask a question because a lot of comments that I heard were about constant changes and kids having to go through changes, right? And unfortunately, it's been a reality for everyone about our changes. But I want to ask, what would happen if we fall back into the purple tier? Or what's the procedure around that? Because I know there's a procedure based on infection at our schools, but if the county goes back into purple tier, what has county talked about? What would that mean for us and for 7th to 12th education?
Yes, so Vice President Lopez, once a school is open, they can stay open because the health and safety protocols would still be in place. And as you mentioned, we have the dedicated contact tracing, we have the quarantine procedures for if there are cases that come up within cohorts. But yes, once they would be open, they would be able to remain open. Now, if there were any other guidance that came from public health, obviously we would have to adjust from that, but that's the current guidance that's in place right now.
Understood. And the second question that I wanted to ask, I didn't see here on here if there's any strategy around vaccinations through from the state, partnering with the state or county, and what is the status on that for education? I know in different counties it's managed differently, but I want to see what was the insight on that.
We're going to get Mr. Herbst a microphone here, and he'll go into details.
Movement. Oh, there. Yeah. A lot of movement on the vaccination front, no doubt about it. And obviously, I think you guys, anybody that's reading the Modesto Bee can just see where we're at as a county. I will tell you, our nurse chairperson today was at a training in order for her to, even though she's been part of the clinics, it's still a requirement to have your nurses come in and be trained on how to administer the vaccination. Very, very, very optimistic that Modesto City Schools will be able to open up a pod for our vaccinations, hopefully beginning next week. I don't want to put a timeline on there, but we will begin vaccinating our staff at this time. In terms of priorities, in terms of who gets the vaccination first, still being determined by public health, but it's basically those 50 and older, if memory serves. I was going to say 55, but it's 50 and older at this point. So we would have to work out a system and a location, which would be Downey High School, to get our staff vaccinated. And then obviously as additional vaccinations become available, I would assume public health would begin lowering that threshold of the 50 and over.
And at this point, where are we planning to receiving our vaccines from? Directly from the state, direct from federal, or direct from county?
It would come from the county to us.
Okay. All right, thanks.
So, something that has shifted this last 3 weeks is California as a whole has, through the governor's office, has changed their strategy for vaccination distribution. It is going now through Blue Shield. So Blue Shield now has the control or the leadership on the distribution of vaccines. So that's one of the part of the reason why we got behind on this, because we were hoping that we were going to be vaccinated earlier than this, but it looks like we're getting past that logjam, and we'll be able to start moving forward hopefully next week.
See no other questions right now. I wanted to tell you, I especially appreciate the support that you're giving in those videos for both our staff and our parents to know what to expect. We've done this for a while now with our TK6 students, and at the beginning it was a little rough, and now it seems like it's smooth sailing, but we have to remember we're starting with a whole new group who are really foreign to all of this, and so giving them the same assurances that we gave our TK6 teachers and parents so that we can transition them into this as smoothly as possible. I had one question concerning, we were talking about the classes that maybe had some more closer contact. What do we foresee for instance, the PE classes looking like?
Right, so our classes that can meet outside, for example, PE, dance and those types of activity classes to the extent possible. That's a recurring phrase through this, is they'll be taking roll outside. We will not be utilizing locker rooms for dressing out during this period for the rest of the year. Again, to cut down on indoor exposure, so to speak. So those classes, PE, will meet outside for roll call and socially distance in their attendance lines and activities outdoors.
Thank you. I know this is going to be so complicated, so I appreciate all the work that is going into trying to figure this out. Seeing no other hands right now, I'm going to ask Ms. Chambers if we have any comments from our questions from the comments from the public right now. None, thank you. Ms. Noonan, do we have any to read from the public? I know we already read.
They were all
already
the
done that.
earlier
Okay.
read ones.
So back to the board for any final comments or questions, and that is Trustee Marks.
So I would request that we reach out to, because there were so many comments from one particular school site, Downey, I'm just asking, could we please reach out to them and see if we can find a way? If block schedule is best, I'd like to see us do it and see if there's an agreement, if we can do a tentative agreement for just that school site. Doesn't seem like we got any from any others asking that, but that's what I'd like to see us do. I feel like these teachers are very passionate and very dedicated to what they do, and because of that, and they took the time to send us an email, and they really care. So I appreciate that they reached out to us. So if we can, that's what I'd like to see us do. But, and then, so that was my comment, and then I'm ready to make a motion when we are ready to make the motion.
Student Representative Carranza?
Comment about the block scheduling as well. My questions are already answered, so thank you for that. But in terms of the block scheduling, I'm just a little bit concerned about the transition for the students, because I heard it mentioned that it would be easier because they would be used to it, but we haven't been in the schedule in a very long time. And especially for freshmen or students who, are still not fully set with their distance learning, I think staying in the block schedule as we transition back would be more valuable. And as you mentioned, it'd be very hard to get that to happen from the school sites that haven't already approved it. But also looking at the two schedules, from a normal 1 through 7th period, a student in the traditional schedule at like Modesto High School, for example, they're getting in a week 2 hours and 5 minutes of the passing periods. And at the normal block schedule, or in a block schedule school like Grigori, those students are getting 1 hour and 10 minutes. So an hour less passing period exposure time with the block schedule as well. So that's another pro. And I had one more comment. I appreciate Ms. Noonan. Thank you for clarifying that once a school is open in the red, it can stay open in the purple, because I know that's a question a lot of parents have. And a lot of people question why other schools who opened up earlier are still able to stay open. And that was because they originally opened in red. And I think that's very important for parents and people to understand. So thank you.
I appreciate hearing our student voice. Thank you so much for that. So if we have no further questions, I'm going to go ahead and take Trustee Marks' motion to approve the plan to reopen 712 schools for in-person instruction. Do I hear a second for that? Trustee Student Rep Carranza? All in favor, please raise your hands and signify by saying aye. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? The motion carries unanimously.
So I just want to read read what it says, because that's very general for the public to say we're doing a reopening plan when we had this discussion, but what's on the table for us is written out. And it says to open 712 schools in a hybrid 2-day per week model in alignment with current CDPH or county public high school guidance, or health guidance. We were talking about high school, so that's why I got the high school there. And then the second part of it was current guidance states that 712 reopening after Stanislaus County reaches 5 consecutive days in the red tier, and then we will open on the 6th day in red. So I just wanted to make that clear for the public, because sometimes you can't see that and it's not right there. So I just want to make sure they understand what's going on, especially if they're watching and they had a lot of questions or had a lot of comments about what we were doing tonight. So thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to propose that we take a 15-minute break right now. We will meet back in 15 minutes. Thank you.
Hi, April. We're back. Let's close. You want to close one of them? Look at that. Good timing.
Welcome back. We're going to continue our meeting now with item B2, a discussion on expanding in-person instruction for TK6 schools. I believe Mr. Godot?
Yes, thank you, Dr. West. Can we get the PowerPoint for TK6? Okay, so this evening I am presenting to you recommendations on.
Is your mic working?
Am I good? Okay. Is to provide the Board of Trustees with information regarding the planning and implementation of increasing our elementary in-person instructional days on our school campuses. So this aligns with district goals 1 and 3, increasing academic achievement and equitable access, as well as providing safe and welcoming, respectful learning environments for our school community. So as we outlined for 7-12 reopening in the schools, similarly at pre-K 6, we have a COVID safety plan. We presented that COVID safety plan back to the board in the fall, which was approved, and it was ultimately Public Health did approve our plan in late October, which provided for our pre-K 6 hybrid instructional model that was implemented on November 12th of 2020. Since then, we've updated the COVID safety plan on February 1st to reflect the most recent public health guidelines that we mentioned in the previous presentation. On January 14th, those additional guidance came out from state and local public health. So further, the Center for Disease Control, or the CDC, issued health and safety recommendations. I want to emphasize recommendations on February 12th. These recommendations from the CDC do not replace or supersede any of the guidelines that the California Department of Public Health or local health officials had issued previously. Important to note here that the same day that the CDC guidance or recommendations came out, the Stanislaus County Public Health Department also notified us that schools could begin potentially combining cohorts for in-person instruction the following Tuesday, which I believe was February 16th. So I'm just trying to establish a timeline here of when we received updated CDC recommendations, which was, I believe, Friday the 12th, and then County Health, Stanislaus County Health, also updating us on the ability to potentially mix our cohorts for in-person instruction. Also important to note here is we are required to take direction from the California Department of Public Health and county public health officials and to follow their requirements. Not all CDC recommendations apply in that situation. So Stanislaus County public health experts recently provided us guidance on how to allow for combining of current cohorts. Important to note here is that current daily cohort attendance from class to class, from grade level to grade level, and from site to site varies greatly. When we look at having potentially 50% of students being able to attend in person on a Monday, Tuesday, not every seat is utilized in those situations, and we've recognized that. However, our reopening plan did not provide us the ability to mix those cohorts up until now. So to combine the cohort classes, the guidance states that we must maintain desk and physical distancing at a minimum of 4 feet. Now, to the extent possible, we're going to go with the maximum if we can, but the minimum is 4 feet to maintain the COVID health and safety protocols. Key to this is how do we maximize the seats that are available in each classroom for those students that want to get in for additional days of in-person instruction. So when we're looking at merging of cohorts A and B, the plan potentially increases in-person learning options for our pre-K 6 students to 4 to 5 days per week of in-person instruction. Each school is currently now evaluating the daily in-person capacity of each of the classrooms. So for example, going back through and aligning the desks at 4 feet apart to identify how many students physically we can accommodate in each classroom. Again, looking to maximize the in-person instruction for families that feel comfortable sending their students to school. Now, in order to do this work of maximizing the in-person seating capacity in every classroom, elementary schools are going to be contacting families this week. Families are going to be asked to make a commitment to either of these two options through the remainder of the school year. Returning to in-person learning, potentially 4 to 5 days per week, or staying on 100% distance learning with concurrent instruction, the same instructional model that we're employing now, for those families that are comfortable or not comfortable with sending their students to in-person instruction. Now, you might ask yourself, why are we asking for a firm commitment now where parents have had the ability to send their students on maybe 1 week but not the next week? Again, it all goes back to how can we maximize the seats each day for families that want to increase the number of in-person learning opportunities for their students. So then the next phase there is if requests exceed capacity. So when we identify the in-person physical attendance capacity of each classroom, and we survey the families and find out who wants to send their students for additional days. If a classroom receives more commitments for in-person instruction that can be accommodated, then we'll have to make adjustments to what that looks like for that classroom during those days. We are currently researching how we might do that, best practices. We are aware of another district, for example, I believe Elk Grove is employing a concurrent instructional model, as well as one or two local, no one's local doing concurrent instruction, but how we might utilize the seats if we have a classroom where the requests exceed the number of seats available. So our next steps include school sites contacting families, as I mentioned, this week to obtain their commitment to either in-person attendance or 100% distance learning. Again, that commitment is through the remainder of the school year. Cohorts could potentially be merged to increase in-person days, and we're looking at targeting early to mid-March in this proposal. So I just want to mention, we are in ongoing conversations and collaboration with our labor partners, the Modesto Teachers Association, to identify how we can best maximize the in-person learning instruction for our students, as well as how we can best support our teachers in this process. And I want to be clear, the concurrent instructional model that we employ is a challenge. It is not easy, and it does take a great deal of preparation and work for our teachers to engage in that work. And managing students at home and in person is different, and not all districts are employing this model, but we believe that it is the least disruptive to our learners, and previously provided a great deal of choice for our families in deciding whether they were going to come for in-person or not. So with that, we're happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Trustee Brown?
Thank you for the presentation, and a big thank you to the teachers who have endured all these challenges and made it work and provided the best instruction that they're able. No one would think that it's easy, and we realize that it's a great hardship for our teachers, so thank you to them. So one of the questions that we did hear from the public, and I have the same question, is that if a family chooses for in-person learning and the child has an off day, does that mean that they cannot log in from home if they've chosen in-person instruction? Because we're asking them to choose one or the other.
we are asking them to choose. And would we block or lock somebody out from being able to log in? No, I don't believe that we would do that. But in order to make the planning in the classroom to identify if we can accommodate everybody, we have to have that commitment from parents. So to the degree possible, I mean, life still happens outside of COVID, so people get sick that don't have COVID. You know, people have dentist appointments and those types of things. So would we permit that? Yes. But again, for planning purposes, we really need to know who is committed to coming 4 to 5 days a week.
Got it. Thank you.
Yeah, my question was around the. He has been in conversations with MTA about the Wednesday, because I've heard a lot about the Wednesday, and I feel, yeah, with all the tips, maybe that Wednesday sounds like a good option at this point to have the planning, the additional meetings, the IP. I mean, it just seems like a lot of work in between, a lot of preparation. So, has those conversations are they concluded, or can they still be revisited? Because it seemed like that was something that was coming up and constantly with some of the comments.
Not concluded, as Mr. Godot mentioned, ongoing collaboration through different phases of change that we've all experienced. And when things change again and it changes the working conditions, we engage again about how we're going to go through the next stage. So, no, we're not done yet. I heard those comments as well. I've heard that prior to tonight, that idea that those Wednesdays have really developed to be utilized for small group specialized focus and interventions and some of the planning of the transition to this concurrent instruction and continue to get professional development and collaborate. There's a lot of utilization in those days that I understand has been very, very productive.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask the same question as Trustee Mejia, but I just want to say that I'm in support of keeping the Wednesday online model as currently is. I do think that as we heard, there's a lot of good things from it, and I would like to see that stay on.
Yeah, I just wanted to piggyback on Trustee Mejia and Trustee Lopez with that Wednesday. I mean, I know a lot of teachers probably use that just to breathe, you know, with all the changes that, you know, literally changed overnight in terms of teaching styles and learning styles, and everybody is trying to adapt to the environment that's seemed like it's in flux, and at times that, you know, that Wednesday could be just a mental relief, you know, at times, or, you know, just so they can just get their hands on everything and, you know, and just get everything, you know, settled and organized and, you know, for planning. I mean, it just seems like it has a lot of benefits to it, you know, in this ever-changing environment. You know, like I say, we have some amazing teachers, you know, adapting to an environment that nobody was prepared for. And so it just seems like that Wednesday should be a time for them to be able to just absorb all of this. So I just wanted to put that out there.
So I'll make a comment about the Wednesday, and then I have a question. I know we used to have a half day or a minimum day on Wednesdays so that our teachers could have collaboration. There was other extra time for doing whatever was needed on those days. I know I could see continuing on having it a whole day as online, but I personally would like to see it a half day or a minimum day like it was if we go back into in-classroom instruction, because as a parent, you're trying to plan your week. You still got Wednesdays you got to try to figure out, and it's may or may not be beneficial for them. We didn't hear from a lot of parents saying they wanted Wednesday. So we heard a lot of parents that said they wanted it 5 days. And so that's what I heard tonight. So the other thing is so that's where my thoughts are. But the other one is, have we looked at listening to what the teacher said from these emails tonight, I'll have to say the majority of the teachers that spoke on doing the hybrid model were against it. So, like super majority. And because I can see that it's very difficult to keep focus on your students and then try to do it from home, and we're videotaping them and trying to do that and made it as easily as possible, but we didn't know exactly how this was going to roll out either when we started. But is it possible to ask the parents at this stage, can they choose in person or all distance learning? That seems reasonable to me at this point. You've already done the dual thing. You've had a chance to stay home and do it and watch the teachers, and I have to say most of the parents who stayed home aren't as in favor of that, maybe as they thought they would be at the beginning. And now, if we're still giving them a choice to stay home and do at-home instruction, can we move them into all the Modesto Virtual Academy? Is it possible to do that at this stage of the year? I don't know, but at least for next year, I would say you got two options: in-home, all Modesto Virtual Academy, or in person. I would just give it stop the hybrid. I think it's too hard for the teachers. The teachers that I know, it's very difficult.
So let me answer that, Trustee Marks. At this point, we cannot do that. Now, can we do that when we start back in August? Absolutely, we can do that, because in order to be able to in order to be able to adjust MVA for those kids that want to be 100% distance learning, we also need teachers. So teachers that are in the class are going to have to move out of the class and go to MVA, which means those students now just lost their teacher for the year, and that's not what we want in the last 12 weeks of school. Now, going into August, I believe as we continue this planning process, you're going to need to make a commitment for the first semester and second semester, and we'll look to see what that looks like, MVA, distance learning 100% or not, and so we can adjust it. But at this point, it would be too destructive to students to move teachers at this point.
Right, okay, I hear you. So, but that's my input, at least at this point, when we look for planning for the future, that I'd like to see us give just two options, because I just think it's really difficult for our teachers. So
it is. Trustee Maestas?
Thank you. So it sounds like, if I hear this correctly, Dr. Noguchi, it sounds like that we're taking away choice because they have to make a decision right now. And so like if a kid's if a family has people living in a house and they get vaccinated, so now they want to go back, but they can't go back now if they make the choice to not go back. So we're taking away that choice to go back into class. But it doesn't sound like there's any other choice than to continue with the hybrid format that we have, so the teachers are going to continue teaching in class and online because we can't move any kids into MBA. Is that what I'm hearing correctly? Like it is what it is until the end of the school year?
So I think we want to, to the best extent possible, be able to accommodate kids. So if some of our classrooms can accommodate 19 kids at a 4 feet distance, some can accommodate 23 kids at a 4 feet distance. If you choose to be in person and you have 19 and another 7 are at home, and one of those 7 decide they want to come, if there isn't any room in the classroom, then that's not going to be an option for them. Right now, is there a way that we could accommodate by changing teachers? I don't know if that's in the cards for the last 12 weeks of school. Actually, it's going to be less than that as we move forward. But we don't want to hamstring our parents. We don't want to not provide choice. But what we need right now is information and numbers to take a look at the students, take a look at the square footage, and look to see what we can do to accommodate.
Right, I understand that. That makes sense. What I'm trying to get to, though, is that for the near future, right now as we see it, the teachers are going to be teaching in this format with the kids in class and some kids at home. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So my thought here is that if that's the case, it seems like many teachers need that Wednesday because there's so much planning that goes in. I mean, they are working so hard, and I was going to save this to the comment portion, but I just want to say, I know that my thank yous and my appreciation doesn't give them back any of all that time they spend on the weekends. But I truly appreciate all that they do, because I have kids in the school right now, and their teachers are working so hard for them. And I see other districts and other places that don't have this hybrid model, and there's less time with kids that teachers have. So I really appreciate all that work. But knowing that, I think it's good to honor that Wednesday, that they have that time to plan for that difficult instruction that we're going to ask them to continue to do. So I don't know if that is included in our vote. Like, if I vote tonight, am I going to vote and then end up them getting that Wednesday taken away? That's what I don't know about that. What is that? Is that in there? What's going on with that?
This isn't an action item.
Okay, got it.
We have Trustee Mejia and then Trustee Brown.
Yeah, my other question, and it doesn't have to be answered today, but I know some teachers brought up the point about how are they going to get additional support from paraprofessionals? Is that something that it's already been kind of penciled out in terms of how, like teachers that have more students, that they're going to get more support versus teachers that maybe have less students showing up into in person? It doesn't have to be answered today. I'm just as one of the questions moving forward. I mean, I can just imagine. I mean, I have kids at home, and when I'm home, it's hard to do your own work and try to help them out. So I can understand an additional set of hands and eyes that could definitely even support, as much as possible, both help the teacher with both when needed, when she's doing group work or individual assessment of a student. Just like I said, if this hasn't been penciled out, it's okay. I just wanted to ask that question. Thank you.
Actually, I'll try slide. Oh. I'm coming. I just don't want to let it linger out there. No, there's not a penciled out plan, but beyond the kindergarten paras, there are a number of paraprofessionals, both that service our students with disabilities, as well as what I'll call multi-tiered system of support paras. They help run intervention groups. As part of their day, our district really prides itself on trying to move to a much more inclusive environment for our kids, which means our paraprofessionals push in at a much higher rate than they have in years past. So I could not say and guarantee that we would have a para in every one of those classes, but I would tell you in a number of our classes, our paraprofessionals and our special education staff do push in to assist with the students that are within that class.
Thank you.
On page 5, on the next steps slide, it said that we're targeting early to mid-March to move into this plan. I wanted to find out if there's some kind of a trigger. Is this tied at all to the purple into red transition, or is this just taking the time to be ready and then moving forward?
It's working with our partners to ensure that we have everything in place to implement this. And if we're looking at mid-March, that's an arms, you can almost reach out and touch that. At the end of this week, we're at the end of February. So we're surveying parents this week. We are collating that data next week to identify what does it look like in every individual classroom. And then, like I mentioned, we've met with MTA the last couple of days to determine the best way to roll that out. And we're really looking at how can we maximize the in-person instruction for students in a timely manner without extending it too far. As Dr. Noguchi pointed out, we've got about 12 weeks of school left. It'll take us about 2 weeks, we believe, to get our ducks in a row at the site level and communicate to families who's going to be coming on those days, and we'll solidify that plan in the coming days this week.
Trustee Mejia, do you have another question?
Yes, and the other question was around if for whatever reason, I know the plans are that the vaccines will be rolled out, but if there's a hiccup, do we have the possibility of coming back and revisiting this and changing it to maybe after spring break? Is that a possibility if it doesn't go according to plan? We say the county may be giving us some information, potentially giving us some information tomorrow, but if it doesn't go, I mean, nothing. I mean, this year shows us nothing goes according to plan. Things change, but if it doesn't, if they can deliver on some of those vaccines to get the teachers. Is that a possibility to?
So opening schools or expanding school opening we've not connected to vaccines at all.
Thank you.
And and also to clarify, expanding or merging our cohorts isn't tied. Our ability to do that per county health guidance is not tied to a tier or anything, as long as we're maintaining the health and safety protocols within the classroom.
And something, if you've been watching the tracking, our COVID tracking that we put up each week that Krista Noonan and her team does, you can see that it's significantly gone down over the last 6 weeks. It's literally taking a nosedive. So we're going in the right direction and doing, as a community, what we need to do. County Public Health does know when things are going to be going back up, and they can predict that just by the models that they have. And so right now they are predicting that we're going to continue to go in a downward trend, and that's even without the vaccines. Although vaccines, my understanding is those should be up and running here in the next week or two, and so that's certainly going to help. But long-term answer to your question, if there's ever a time that we see something shift or change, or we don't believe that it's going to be safe, we'd stop planning and come back to you all. So nothing is a done deal in the COVID environment. We're always being vigilant, and we're looking at the data and very mindful of health and safety protocols and ensuring that we're keeping that at the center stage of our decision making.
See no other questions. My questions have all been answered. I just want to say I support honoring those Wednesdays to help our teachers as well. Ms. Chambers, do we have any comments from the public? None. Ms. Noonan, we've already read the comments concerning this prior. So any final comments from the board? See none. This was a discussion only. Sorry, you're not showing up on my screen. Yes, Trustee Maestas, I see you now.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I just so I had just a couple of comments I jotted down after listening to all the emails that we got and everything, and I just want to say one more time how thankful I am for the teachers in all of their hard work. I know that there's teachers suffering out there and worried that they don't think they're going to continue teaching, and I just ask that all of them be vigilant, hold on, we're all going to get through this, hopefully sooner than later. And the other thing is that the studies that have all been come out, all the research, every single one of them has said that there needs to be consistent mitigation, mask wearing. So I urge everyone in our community to do our best together to get COVID down, so that we can get all our kids and all our teachers and everything back to going. So I just wanted to make that comment while I had the floor. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, we will be going to our final item of the evening, which is B3, a discussion on teacher grading practices for the 2020-2021 school year. Is this Mr. Godot?
It is. It's actually a team effort, another team effort this evening. I'm actually going to be co-presenting with Dr. Odell, as well as student representative Carson Carranza. So our next item, teaching grading practices for 2021. We're going to provide the Board of Trustees with information regarding our quarter one and semester one grades at the 7-12 level. We're going to review the work that was completed in the fall through our secondary grading task force that was implemented when we observed the data trending the way that it was. We're also going to provide some student voice to the challenges of grading, and that's where our student rep to the board is going to come in this evening and share some insights from our students, as well as outlining some short-term and long-term plans to address some of these complex grading practices and policy issues. So again, a lot of goal one tonight, focusing on increasing academic achievement and equitable access to enable all students to attain college and career readiness. And as you're well aware, the issuance of grades and earning of grades is key to really that access and attainment. So the impacts of COVID-19 have really had a detrimental impact on student achievement. We heard that right out of the gate, right? Before, what's it going to be like? We heard it last spring. We saw the impact. We were more prepared in the fall. But again, these are the best of the worst case scenarios, right? I mean, we can't have everybody back doing it the way that we've always done. So we started in distance learning this year. The feedback and anecdotal evidence was definitely pointing to a precipitous drop in student academic performance. Now, interestingly, in quarter one, we saw an average student engagement rate of nearly 94.5%. And so when we're talking about student engagement, we're talking about students that demonstrated that they logged in to their device on those days. So I think we would all agree that logging into a device doesn't necessarily equal academic achievement. But we have kids tuning in. They have the ability to tune in. However, as listed there in the last bullet point, consistent attendance engagement does not equal academic achievement. And we noticed that failing grades were skyrocketing during distance learning. So I'm going to share some data with you, focusing on first our junior high quarter one data. And this is a 5-year trend data for quarter one, and the highlighted row in each one of those, with Hanshaw at the top, followed by La Loma, Mark Twain, and Roosevelt. That is the data from this year, 2020, quarter one. So you can see our lowest F rate this year in quarter one at junior high was at Hanshaw. I believe that is about 17.5%, which was an increase of 10 percentage points from last year when they had an F rate of 7.41%. So if you look down, you can see the F rates trending, and it's very apparent. At quarter one, we knew we were looking at double, triple, potentially quadruple the number of Fs than we would traditionally see at the end of quarter one. Transitioning to high school. On this page, we have Beyer, Davis, and Downey. Again, looking at a similar trend where you can see, and if you're looking at the grade distribution chart here, you can see that the A's, we have less A's than we would normally see. We have less B's than we would normally see. We have less C's than we would normally. So the grades have been cascading down, right? And where do they end up? Those grades have ended up in the failing percentage there. So increasing percentages of F's is the standard course. Downey High, for example, at the end of quarter one, had nearly 32% of all grades issued were failing grades. Clearly some red flags there. Looking at Modesto, Johansson, Enox, and Grigori, noting that Enox had the lowest F rate at the end of quarter one, 14.84%, which was still for Enox almost 9 percentage points higher than they would traditionally, or that they would have seen the previous year. And here we have Elliott, again, seeing an increase in the F rate and traditional cascading down, not traditional, but the cascading down of grades in the grade distribution chart as a result of distance learning. So with that, we saw progress report 1 in the first quarter. We saw quarter one grades. At that point, we were having conversations and decided that one of the strategies to help identify how to address this precipitous drop in academic performance was to put together a secondary grading task force. And with that, I am going to turn it over to Dr. Odell.
Thank you, Mr. Godot. Good evening, President West, board members, Dr. Noguchi, and community members watching. So that's correct. We started a secondary task force. Our purpose was to review best practices currently happening at the sites. There's some wonderful things that are taking place, and possible options to support students in earning those passing grades. We really explored two topics: the grading ideas, and with it, greatly tied into that is the engagement of the students, ensuring that they're really involved and present in mind, body, and spirit with the teacher there online. We met 3 times. The dates are there: November 17th, 23rd, and December 1st. Next slide, please. You can see our robust task force. We had over 57 teachers represented, as well as every content area, special education, English learners, and some other areas were represented as well. Next slide. We started our time together. They actually had homework. Being a teacher myself, I gave out homework to start our group. And we had some articles to read so that the staff meeting together had a foundation for what we were talking about and what we were facing. You can see there the different articles we read: the case against the zero, no zero policies, do they help or hurt students? Rethinking grading, a book that we read. And we also recommended, some staff had already read the book, Grading for Equity, that we have talked about here in board meetings previously. So in our time together, thank you, what I've done here is I've summarized our best ideas by content. And what you're going to see actually is very closely related to what just came out today with grading recommendations for the state. And I'll summarize those by saying we talked a lot about accepting late work, giving no penalty for turning in late work, making projects, actually making work more project-based, collaborating together, focusing on students and parent work, verbalizing things, working concurrently together. Instead of sending the student home offline to do it, doing it in class, online together. We talked about the need for social emotional supports and getting, finding out where the students are every day when they logged in. We talked about tutoring, changing the grading scale. Next slide. Oh, thank you. In history, social studies, they talked about no late work penalties, identifying essential homework, work assignments, and grading, giving different weights to those assignments. Looking at minimum competencies to move forward through their units of study, and really focusing on formative assessments. So you can see a pattern. Most of the content areas did actually have overlap with their ideas, including reduced homework, focusing on standards, and multiple smaller assessments to make things not weigh so heavy on one grade, one assessment. So those are some of the ideas that our group came up with over our time. And if you'll recall, this last week I sent you a board communication where we actually had a few teachers talk about what a great experiment that was for them to experience, for them to be involved, and how they've actually taken some of those ideas and implemented them into the classroom now. Mr. Godot.
Okay, so going through that process in the first semester, seeing the drop in grades, looking at those grade distribution charts, putting together the secondary grading task force, communicating those recommendations, and putting those out and communicating amongst the teachers. Hey, how do we address these very unique and special circumstances this year with distance learning? So what you have here is again, a longitudinal look of a 4-year trend of our semester 1 grades. Interesting to note, you'll see there for Hanshaw, actually, in 2021, their semester one A's actually increased relative to the rest, relative to what they would normally see traditionally in semester grades. That was not the case for our other junior highs. Again, still looking at that trend of grades cascading, less A's, less percentage of A's, less percentage of B's, less percentage of C's, and in most cases, an increase in the percentage of D's and an increase in the percentages of F's. In a moment, when I'm done going through the semester grade, I'm actually going to show you a slide that will show you the difference between quarter one and semester one for each school. But important to see here, our lowest F rate for our junior highs was at Hanshaw at just a hair over 9% of the grades issued in semester one were F's, and a high rate at Mark Twain of 21.4% of the grades issued were F's. Now, I added to this chart for just some perspective for semester one. That far right column is the DF student rate. So that's the percentage of students that earned 1D or 1F. Okay, so to put that in context, at La Loma, 62.68% of students at the end of semester one received at least 1D or 1F. The high was at Mark Twain for that rate, and the low again was at Hanshaw. So transitioning now to high school, again, Bayer, Davis, and Downey represented on this chart. Again, interestingly, Bayer's A rate or percentage of A's at the end of semester one was a hair above what they would traditionally see. Again, not the case for the other schools, though Downey was close in that regard, just under previous 33.3% back in 18-19. You can see the F rates there. Bayer 11 just almost 11.7, Davis 22.9, Downey 23.6, and again you can see the DF student rate in the far right column. And important to note that Bayer had the lowest percentage of DF rate. Excuse me. Enoch's had the lowest rate. But Bayer's was at 41.45. That was pretty low relative to the other schools. Transitioning to the next slide here. Again, the cascading of grades downward. Bayer, interestingly, again, had more A's than they would traditionally see. But for the most part, those grades slid down into the DF realm. Our highest student rate for D's and F's was at Modesto High at just under 64%, 63.74%. And our lowest F rate at the end of semester one was at Grigori with just under 12%, 11.89%. Transitioning to Elliott, some good news here. Our students at Elliott did perform somewhat better than we have traditionally seen in the previous years at the end of semester one. We saw back in 18-19, 9.16% of the grades were F's. In 19-20 last year, that actually increased at the end of semester one to 11.4. This year, our Elliott students at the end of semester one, 6.53% of the grades issued were F's. It was a little bit more challenging to provide the DF student rate because of the way the data sets are set up and student schedules at Elliott, so I don't have that to share with you. Now the next slide is what I spoke to a moment ago, comparing this year quarter one to semester one. So not to diminish the fact that academic performance in the form of grades did decrease this year. However, it's important to note that we traditionally see improvement from quarter one to semester one grades. However, the data is troubling. We definitely have seen an increase in the number of students failing classes, but to see that we had the improvement that we did from quarter one to semester one indicates that we believe that a number of the strategies, communication, professional development, did have an impact. Can we say that it was one thing? No. We can't unequivocally say that, but we did see improvement. And we also recognize through this process of data analysis that we have identified discrepancies in the grade data by student group. I've given you more of a global view here this evening of all students at schools, and we're going to discuss later in the presentation how the work is going to continue moving forward to address these student group discrepancies. Oops, go back. I'll go back one slide. I didn't speak to the data. So you can see the green highlights there, text fields show the improvement. So every one of the schools, with the exception of Johansson, improved their F rate from quarter one to semester one. Johansson was just about static, 0.04 decrease, or increase, excuse me, in the number of Fs. Again, our biggest change or swing was at La Loma for our junior highs. They decreased the F rate by just under 9 percentage points. And at the high school, Downey High School saw the greatest decrease of 8.3 percentage points from quarter one to semester one. So with that, I'm going to turn the microphone over to student representative to the board, Carson Carranza.
Thank you, Mr. Godot. So the Inter-High Council and I are advocating on behalf of a grading procedure that would bring the lower bound of grading to a 50% for the rest of second semester. When a student does not do an assignment, we recommend they receive a 50% in the gradebook to make it easier to rebound from a failing grade in the future. Students still receive an F for a class if there is no engagement, but students with the failing grade will be motivated to aim for a passing grade when the base level is a 50 instead of a 0. And I heard Dr. Odell mention a couple articles about this exact sort of grading procedure. And as we saw in the data from this presentation, the number of students with Ds and Fs have sharply increased since we started distance learning. In a normal classroom setting, students are motivated to learn to do assignments by their teachers, healthy peer influence, and by simply being immersed in the classroom setting. This adjustment to the grading procedure will help students personally motivate themselves to raise that 50% to a 60 or a 70% to pass the class and meet their A through G requirements. And this is a grading procedure that's been talked about a lot even before COVID, but has been brought up even more. And there was a workshop about it at the CSBA conference, and it's been a topic of discussion at almost every student board member, California Student Board Member Association meetings. And so the Inter-High Council, I got some feedback from them that I would like to share with you all. Next slide, please. So a student from Johansson High School states that even if the grading policy were to bring some students to be a little bit more lazy, the students who never do their work would have failed regardless of distance learning because a 50% is still an F. The policy will greatly benefit students who realize at the quarter, for example, that they would like to raise their grade to a passing grade. It will be nice for students to have that option to raise their grade, that extra 10% from a 50 to a 60, in order to graduate. A student from Enoch states, the pandemic and distance learning have created new circumstances for students to navigate, and they do want to pass their classes. Distance learning has hampered learning to some extent for every student, and it would be beneficial to implement this recommended policy for this semester and these circumstances only. But grading equity will be needed to be readdressed after distance learning and after COVID. And a student from Modesto High School states that the policy will likely receive a positive response from staff because it will be a recommendation, and they can choose if they would like to implement this policy or not. And teachers have done an amazing job this year teaching students during COVID. It's just that students are unable to get the same support at home as they would in a normal classroom setting. So we are asking educators to explore new grading policies like this recommendation to best accommodate students. Thank you.
Thank you, Carson. So what are our next steps? We're going to share some short-term and some long-term steps to address the grading challenges that we've discussed this evening. So first, continuing the recommendations of the grading task force. And one thing that we've seen through this process this year is teachers really need to hear that it's okay to deviate away from their traditional grading practices. That might sound very easy, but for folks that have been teaching for a long time, the grading is a very sacred thing to teachers, and it's a complex conversation when we're talking about grading and making those changes. But we'll continue to reinforce the recommendations from their colleagues through the secondary grading task force. We're going to expand our intersession opportunities. Now, I didn't get into a lot of the details of intersession, but I will here just very quickly. Just prior to winter break, a strategy was identified to utilize one of the third week of winter break for students to come work with their teachers for between 1 and 5 days that week to potentially raise their grade from one of their current classes in that third week. That isn't something that we would traditionally be doing. That was one of the strategies that we employed to address failing grades or students that needed to improve to increase that grade so that they can meet A through G college requirements. That was implemented in the third week of winter break. We're also looking at how we can implement that similar practice or that similar support for students during spring break as well as into the summer. We've expanded G230 teachers at every high school. Well, we are looking at expanding G230 teachers. You're going to hear more about that on March 8th when Senior Director Rachel Barkus will be coming with some alternative ed recommendations. We're also increasing student supports at the site level and looking at some different ways that we can increase tutoring and one-to-one support for students, as well as continuing to examine our grade data and the impact particularly that it's going to have on our class of 2021, our seniors this year, and what will that look like and the impact it may have on meeting graduation requirements. So next steps, long term, there's no doubt through the analysis and looking at our grade data that there's deep work that needs to be done in this area. And interestingly, grading is probably one of the least addressed areas in teacher preparation programs. Going back to when I was going through a credential program, through admin programs, this really isn't an area that is delved into deeply. But this is an area that as a district we see the need for some work. So we are recommending a grade equity task force to address site and student group grade data, as well as through the work of the equity task force, identifying any grading policy recommendations to bring to the board for future consideration. There's a lot of work to do around grading, but key to that work is creating the buy-in from the stakeholders, the buy-in from the students, the buy-in from the teachers, and key to that work is going slow to go fast. So with that, open it up for any questions.
Questions from the board? We'll go with Trustee Urban and then Trustee Lopez.
Yes, looking at the report, going over it, digesting it, and looking at the student voice part, which is a critical part of that as well. So how is this going to help students currently, like those students who were on track A through G up until COVID came and now have a D or a F? What will be their recourse, because their grades already hit that transcript? And so what recourse will there be for them going forward? And how are they currently being identified as we speak? And we get the grade equity task force. So these same students, because if they were on track and they got D's or F last semester, they're probably on that same course heading into the second semester currently. So how are they being identified in order to align them with some of the recommendations that the student voice came with and the equity, the equity grade task force has been proposing? And so that's basically my question. How are we preventing them from become repeat, I'm not gonna say offenders, but repeat,
Right.
grades of D's and F, when prior to all of this, they were doing well, A through G, on track, and now they're not on track.
So the students, so for example, at the end of semester one, when we were getting ready to implement the intercession, which was a completely new concept of how to support students in improving their academic performance in specific classes, we used data to identify students that were struggling, D's or F's, and and particularly focused on getting those students into those intercessions to give them opportunities to raise their grades. Students that did not take that opportunity at the end of semester one, in that third week of winter break, and their grade was submitted by the teacher of record for that grade, as you put it, is put onto their transcript. That in working through a spring break intercession or a summer intercession, those opportunities might still be presented to students. Again, we have to recognize that the teachers have, the teacher of record has the legal standing to change a grade as well as to issue the grade. So for example, at spring break, should a teacher provide those opportunities for students, a student could potentially go in and improve their semester one grade this year without having to go back and remediate for the entire class. Similarly, we're looking at doing the intercession-like program in addition to traditional summer school, which would be utilized for classes that may have been failed outside of this school year. There's a need for both. And I'll say this, anecdotally speaking, I think the vast majority of our teachers are working really hard to give students the benefit of the doubt, extending deadlines, taking late assignments, working with kids to find ways to give them opportunities to show their achievement and the attainment of the standards, depending on the class. But there are definitely a lot of challenges out there.
Yeah.
Vice President Lopez? Skip you, okay. Trustee Marks?
So I had a couple of things. I wanted to find out about the equity task force. So I know with this week when we met, at the equity task force, there was a plan to bring an item forward to the board for consideration on looking into the grading policy, because students who are disadvantaged in any way, could be their ethnicity or their poverty, whatever has created something in the classroom, maybe with the teacher, how they're treating them, has been something that was brought up in the task force to bring forward. So is this grade equity task force, is this what that is talking about? Is that what this item is?
That is correct, Trustee Marks. And I believe Mr. Herbst will be providing additional information down the road around the equity task force.
Well, so I can speak to that a little bit. Basically, it's two things have come together,
Yeah.
right? You've got COVID, quarter one semester, and recognizing there's work to be done. There was the board. You all went to CSBA, and you collectively said we need to have a grading equity task force next year. And then there was also the equity task force doing the work. And so 3 different areas have identified this work. And so we will put into motion once school gets open, and we can settle a bit, and then we'll bring folks together towards the end of this year, and then bring them back for next fall, and then work through that for about probably a 6-month process using the same book and the same Mr. Feldman, I believe is his name.
Yes.
So it's really 3 different areas that have targeted this work.
Okay, good. That's because when I saw the dates when the task force met, I was like, wait, that's even before the conference happened. So I was like, wow, we've been already working on this as a district. So that was really cool when I saw those dates. So next question is, on our student Carranzo, what he brought up tonight about recommending to the board to change the grading. I know that would be a recommendation, and my understanding is in order to change anything we have right now, it'd have to actually be a policy. So I'm wondering what next steps are the students allowed to, can we as a board say, yes, we want to accept a recommendation from the students? What's the process for this? from his suggestion?
So I can speak to that. So we had some, so teachers, we said we had 52 teachers came up with different strategies for different grade, for different subject areas. But we also had a student group doing the same thing. So what I would suggest at this point is take the recommendations from Inter-High Council and add it to what was done with that committee, and then get that back out to students, get that back out to teachers as well. And I think it would also be good to identify on that document that this was a student recommended from, Inter-High Council, so that's district-wide effort in that as well. So it's just getting it back out to teachers. We can certainly say this is what we're recommending, this is what we believe is fair and equitable. We can't force anything at this point, but we can show that there's a lot of support from the students and staff on that. Now, next year at this time or before, I would like to bring grading policies back along with graduation requirements, which is going to be a big chunk of work put together. Then we will look at board policies and do our due diligence on putting that in writing and moving that forward.
So right now, does it mean that the students need to bring a recommendation to the board? We can vote on a recommendation, and it's only a recommendation, it's not a policy, but it's a recommendation to go back out to teachers and say the students brought this forward to the board's supporting the students, or does that not happen? Is that what you're saying, we don't do that?
Yeah, I don't see, if you want to informally make a recommendation and do a motion and vote on this recommendation to be added to the strategies to be put on that paper, certainly we can do that as a show of support to the students and the work that they've done. And I don't think it's going to, you'd certainly not do any harm at all, because it is a recommendation and it'll be added to the work that's already, that has already transpired with that particular committee around grading.
So I'd like to see that happen if it's possible, and if the board agrees to that we could bring that forward, because this is pretty cool that the students brought this forward. We're already doing work on it, and they're really invested in this, especially the seniors are really invested in this. And hope that, teachers would take that into consideration when they're doing the grades. But I know it's not a policy, and right now 0 to 50 is still an F. So it's very frustrating for many students. So I'd like to see that happen. So I don't know what we have to do that, but it would be cool.
So I can bring it back at the next board meeting. We have a pretty lengthy board meeting, but since we've had a lot of the conversation here, but I can add, I think we have 5 presentations, but we can add another one because we're doing the dialogue here. So we'll work with our student group and move that forward.
Okay, thank you. That'd be awesome.
Trustee Brown?
Yeah, I want to express gratitude for agenda items that have been on the current meeting and the previous meeting, finding ways that we can encourage better engagement. We've relaxed our standards on participation in sports and extracurricular activities, which will help to engage students in the learning process because they've got a meaningful reason to do that. And then the fact that we're looking at the equity in grading, I would like to ask Dr. Odell. Seems like there's some parallel content to what our student representative has been addressing to what was addressed by the teacher task force. Have any of those teachers within that group identified the fact that they have implemented this 50 instead of a 0 for work not turned in? Do we have any way of tracking that?
Yes, we actually had some try it. I recall one teacher saying, well, I'm not sure if I'm going to keep doing it next semester, but I decided I'm going to try this. The fact of the matter, like Mr. Godot said, is a lot of our teachers, especially newer ones coming out of programs, this is never talked about in their teacher induction program. So they probably about a dozen, no more than 15, but about a dozen teachers that were on this task force didn't know they had options because it's never talked about. So it was information giving. They loved having the information, and they shared as peers. They said, can you show me how to change that grading scale in Power School? And they shared ideas together that they didn't have before. So we did have people trying it and collaborating on what could work in their own classrooms. It was exciting.
To follow up on that, if teachers who have participated in this this task force, this group, are able to implement, do other teachers throughout the district know that they have that same option?
Well, we can never over communicate and make sure that everybody knows and share that information, but we did, CIPD put out a memo to teachers explaining that Power School at the semester changed their format so that teachers had more authority to move their grades around the way they chose to. And we did send out memos and send out information of ideas that they can do. They're all on our website. And of course, we can always get that out again, communicate that, over communicate it.
Well, thank you.
Seeing no more questions from the board, I had just one quick question. The third week of winter break, the intervention that was offered, do we have a number of students that took advantage of that?
Yes, we do have some data on that. We can share in a board communication.
Okay, I would just be interested, we're offering this. Are students actually taking advantage of that or not? I'm just curious. Thank you. Ms. Chambers, do we have any comments from the public on this item? None. Ms. Noonan, do we have any comments?
No, there were no
Public
comments
from
on
you.
this item.
Thank you. Back to the board for any comments. Trustee Mejia?
And just a comment, I know we said a couple times that the induction programs, are we having, as a school district being the largest, one of the largest in the county, having conversations with those universities to begin to talk about that, if it's something that is still not happening? Are we planning on anything like that, talking to?
So actually, we're right at the very beginning of bringing on a new director of induction, and that's going to be part of the process that we use. So we rather than reaching out to the universities and trying to get them to move this work forward, we personally, as a district, is going to be moving this forward with all of our new teachers. Once we figure out what that looks like, we can certainly give some ideas and recommendations, whatever comes out of this next board meeting. But really, what I would like to see is some policies and some buy-in from some teacher ambassadors across this district next year at this time. But the answer would be yes, we're going to be doing it in-house.
Okay, thank you.
Trustee Mejias? Maestas, I'm so sorry. Sorry. I want to make sure I don't miss your hand and I mispronounced. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so I just, in a comment back to what Trustee Mejia was saying, in 20 years of teaching in the classroom, I not once was taught anything about grading other than what I knew from my own teachers. And then I read a book, Grading for Equity by Joe Feldman, which was the one that Dr. Gucci was talking about. And it changed everything I thought about. So it really is something that I think we can have a conversation without being scared about taking away any teacher's professional ability to give out a grade for a student. So thank you for presenting that. I'm so happy to see that this is something that we're looking at the long term. And like you said, we go slow to go fast because this is a collective effort for all of our kids. So thank you so much for doing this for us.
And since that book changed kind of your whole philosophy of grading, I'm wondering if we could have a PD, any kind of PD that we offer to the teachers, maybe based upon that book for teachers who are interested in learning more about that. Just a thought. Okay, seeing no more comments, I am looking for a motion to adjourn. It's too late, Trustee Brown. No, yes, you may.
This has nothing to do with the agenda items, but the public doesn't see what we do at the extreme effort to maintain cleanliness in this room. And I just want to acknowledge the gentleman who's been wiping down microphones and making sure that everybody is safe and well protected here. So thank you.
And I want to make just one comment. I want to thank this board for agreeing to change what we had planned. So on the books for many months, we had planned to talk about facilities and bond and grading. Just literally last week, I think it was Wednesday, I pivoted and called President West and asked her to make that change, really from an outcry from our parents. Our parents in our community, we're talking a lot about the changes in CDC guidelines and the 4 feet and the implications, and so I appreciate your willingness to change and to pivot for that. We have another special board meeting next week, March 1st, around governance training and just the training that we're doing as a team. We are going to ask Mr. Zerley and his team to present some of the facility work that we would have seen today, but I just wanted to give that update. And again, thank you for making the changes to this board meeting.
Thank you.
I motion that we adjourn.
Okay, thank you. Mejia and Marks, all in favor, raise your hand, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Passes, meeting is adjourned.